The raven came on a morning washed silver with frost, its black wings a stark brushstroke against the pale sky above the Ares' high courtyard. Eddard Stark, lean and solemn at 18, unrolled the vellum with careful fingers, feeling the cold nibble his bones even through his duskin gloves. The crest was unmistakable. 3 red dragons on a field of black. Yet the wax felt oddly brittle, as though the distance between King's Landing and the Vale had leached its warmth away. Beneath the sigil ran the curling command of King Aerys II. The young heir to Winterfell was summoned south to discuss a matter vital to the enduring peace of the realm. Jon Arryn watched Ned, blue eyes narrowed beneath snowy brows. The last time a Stark rode south at royal command, the Lord of the Eyrie muttered. It ended with 2 charred corpses in the Red Keep's throne room. Ned folded the letter. And yet, the realm still turns. If the king calls, I must answer. Arryn placed a fatherly hand on the boy's shoulder. Then go with every lesson I gave you. Honor bends more easily than it breaks, but break it does when the fire grows hot enough. Now. 6 weeks later, Ned's column clattered through the capital's Lion Gate, under banners of direwolf gray and Arryn sky blue. King's Landing smelled of brine and tannery vats, of hot bread and soot, of too many men living cheek by jowl. Between the towering gates of the Red Keep, he found serpentine corridors flanked by gold-cloaked guards, whose helms glinted like false suns. At the great doors of the throne room, a herald announced him in a voice that echoed down marble like a tolling bell. The Iron Throne loomed, all jagged shadow and rusted menace. King Aerys sat high above, pale hair dangling in lank ropes, fingers twitching upon the arms of his seat as though itching to feel the bite of unseen flames. Yet the king's eyes were not on Ned, but on the girl standing at his side. She could not be older than 16. Moon-silver hair spilled loose. To wear it unbound in court was a breach of formality, though somehow no one dared remark on it. Her gown was dark red, the color of coals under ash, and the dragon gorget at her throat sparkled with garnets. When her violet eyes met Ned's, they held a curious mingling of serenity and caged heat, like ice suspended over a vent of molten rock. Sir Eddard Stark, heir of Winterfell. The king rasped, each word dragged across dry flint. I present to you my daughter, Princess Daenora Targaryen. Rumors had whispered of her. A second daughter born after Rhaella's last difficult birthing, kept largely from court to spare her the madness creeping through the royal line. The princess dipped a curtsy so fluid it seemed a dance step. I know of Winterfell, she said, voice soft but carrying. Old Nan's tales reached even these walls. Ned glanced at Aerys, who leaned forward, thin lips peeled in something like a smile. For a century the North has stood apart, the king declared. Even when dragons ruled all else, Stark wills remained iron. Yet our realm is one body, and a body at odds with itself festers. I would see that rot cut away. Thus, you will wed my daughter, uniting ice and fire, end this talk of rebellion the Baratheon whelp spreads in his cups, and bind my southern lords by awe of the North's honor. The hall erupted with a susurrus. Grand Maester Pycelle frowned under snowy whiskers. Lord Tywin Lannister's golden gaze flashed like a drawn blade. Prince Rhaegar, standing beneath a pillar of stained glass, said nothing at all, his stillness a page yet unread. Aerys' throne shrieked as he rose. Kneel, boy, he hissed. Swear it, or ride home and count the years until the dragons come again. The cold of the Eyrie seemed suddenly far away. Ned's mind flicked through every teaching of honor, of duty, of the cost of vows once spoken. He saw Lyanna's laughing eyes, felt Robert's hand clap his back in the training yard, tasted the salted wind of Winterfell's battlements. If he refused, a slighted king might turn his wrath north. If he accepted, the wolf would share den with the dragon. Ned knelt. The words came steady. I, Eddard Stark of Winterfell, do swear before gods and men to take Princess Daenora Targaryen to wife, to do my duty by king and realm, and to guard the peace henceforth with all the strength of ice and fire together. Across him, Daenora's lips parted, not in surprise so much as in relief. as though she too had wagered her soul on this betrothal, and only now realized she had won. Their wedding was hastily arranged, a riot of rubies and direwolf banners that clashed like summer dandelions in fresh snow. Bands played Dornish reels beside northern dirges. Septons chanted over a heart tree branch, shipped from the Wolf's Wood by swift courier. Robert Baratheon arrived late, half drunk, and near shattered a goblet when the bride walked the aisle. Only Jon Arryn's restraining hand kept him from some ill-timed outburst. In a corner, Lyanna Stark watched in silence, gray eyes storm-dark. The bedding proved subdued. Aerys had forbidden the traditional body stripping. Instead, Ned escorted his bride to a solar draped in fabrics, dyed the deep blue-black of Winterfell midwinter. Servants withdrew. A single candle trembled on a sideboard. Daenora rested her palm upon Ned's chest. "Do you know?" "They said my father would roast me if I disappointed him. They think the madness is infectious." Ned caught her hand gently. "Worse things spread in court than madness. Ambition, for one." She laughed, a sound like frost snapping. "Yet here we stand, sacrificing ourselves upon the altar of peace." "Peace," Ned said, "is worth a sacrifice." When their lips met, it was neither fire nor ice, but the breath of a hesitant dawn. Fragile, irretrievable once lost, so they guarded it fiercely through the night's long hours. Winterfell greeted its dragon princess under flakes of early snow. Children lined the ridges of the old Inner Bailey, gawking at her silver hair. Hounds sniffed warily, then accepted her after one calm stroke. Old Nan clicked her tongue in wonder while Princess Daenora touched the ancient heart tree and whispered Valyrian prayers that spun in white mist from her lips. Catelyn Tully, promised now to Brandon alone, arrived weeks later for the re-announced betrothal. She studied Daenora's every move with the poised caution of one who weighs her own survival daily. Yet Cat, ever pragmatic, embraced her soon-to-be sister by marriage, and the union of wolf and dragon became a tapestry stretching from Dorne to the Wall in rumor and song. Even so, winter's wind carried darker tidings. In the Riverlands, whispers spread of Crown Prince Rhaegar's fascination with Lyanna Stark, of tourney honors laid upon her lap, of roses black as midnight. Robert Baratheon's anger curdled. Ravens flew between Storm's End and Winterfell, parchment-lashed claws dripping bile. Ned burned each letter in a brazier, but the smoke lingered under the rafters long after. King Aerys' sanity frayed further. He demanded wildfire stockpiles beneath the city, ordered his Kingsguard to spy upon lords he deemed faithless, including his son. In that fever of suspicion, he clutched the Northern Alliance like a drowning man to rotten driftwood, sending Daenora silken gowns embroidered with wolves and dragons intertwined. "She will wear the realm's salvation," he proclaimed, "and its enemies shall freeze in dragonflame." To Ned, those gifts smelled of desperation. "Aerys banks our marriage as coin," he told Daenora one night, while their infant son, whom they named Torrhen after the last Stark king to kneel, slept between a dire wolf plush and a wooden dragon rattle. "I fear when the king's purse empties, he will melt the coin for fire." Daenora's violet gaze flashed. "Then we must ensure the purse never empties. Our son carries both legacies. He could bind the realm after Aerys is gone." Ned brushed a fingertip over the babe's downy head. "Pray we see that day before the wolves of war descend." The storm finally broke at Harrenhal. When Prince Rhaegar crowned Lyanna Stark Queen of Love and Beauty, Robert roared treason. Brandon Stark demanded Lyanna's return. The Mad King answered with chains and fire. Rickard, Lord of Winterfell, died screaming in the aptly named Hall of the Torches, while Brandon strangled himself futilely trying to save him. Word reached Winterfell in shards of ravens' cries. Ned's knees buckled as Maester Luwin read the sealed letter. His father, his brother, gone, eaten by wildfire and madness. And he was 3 weeks' ride from King's Landing with a wife whose blood matched the king's own. Grief hammered him, but honor braced the fracture. Ned summoned his bannermen beneath the heart tree. "I ride south," he declared. "Not for vengeance, but for justice. House Stark seeks a reckoning from the king who spilled northern blood unprovoked. Now, some lords hesitated, marching against House Targaryen while Ned's wife and child were half of it. Yet the banners rose. Wolves never lacked for loyalty. They rode, leaving Winterfell's gates yawning like a wound. Daenora stood upon the ramparts, silver hair whipping, Torhin in her arms. She did not weep. "Bring my father to reason," she called, "or burn the madness from him." Ice and fire, Ned thought, but today the ice feels brittle. Robert's rebellion ignited like tinder. Stormland's Vale and North formed a trident aimed at King's Landing. In the Reach and Westerlands, alliance lines blurred, yet Tywin's gold waited, measuring odds. Dragons still ruled the skies in song, but in truth only shadowed memories remained. The true power lay with armies of men, steel-clad and hungry. Daenora remained at Winterfell, hostage and queen to be both. When ravens arrived with Aerys's commands, "Send me my daughter, or I will put your husband's head above the gate," she replied in a letter penned by her own hand, "I am no longer your chattel, but Lady Stark of Winterfell. Harm my lord, and your dynasty ends with your last breath." And Nawandi. The Mad King nearly choked on rage. Pycelle, trembling, convinced him to stay his wrath, claiming Daenora might yet be turned. But each raven Daenora sent carried the same message: peace through reason, or the storm of ice and fire would flood the throne. At the Trident, armies met. Rhaegar, clad in rubies, led loyalist forces. Ned, in dark plate with a direwolf sigil etched in pale silver, rode beside Robert. Brother against brother, by marriage. Songs later, said the river itself paused to witness. The clash was thunder. Robert's hammer crushed helmet and breastplate alike, yet Rhaegar's sword sang Valyrian shrieks. Finally they met midstream, ruby breastplate glinting crimson in sunrise light against the mailed black of Storm's fury. It was not Ned who slew the prince, but Robert, yet Ned was there to see the rubies scatter like bloodied tears. When the battle ended, Ned knelt beside the fallen dragon prince. "I never wished this," he whispered. Rhaegar's eyes, once thoughtful, stared at a sky gone empty of stars. Robert roared triumph. The realm, he bellowed, was his. Yet Ned's heart weighed heavier than the mud of the river on his boots. King's Landing's gates opened to treachery. Tywin Lannister entered first, claiming loyalty, then loosed his soldiers upon the city. Aerys, half mad and cornered, commanded wildfire caches lit, but Jaime Lannister's sword struck from behind, ending the Mad King before flames could spread. Still, the sack raged. Rhaegar's young children perished beneath Lannister blades, and their mother Elia with them. Ned arrived to the smell of smoke and baby's blood. He confronted Tywin before the Iron Throne, corpse of Aerys still cooling in its shadow. "This is not justice," Ned cried. "This is slaughter." Tywin's gaze held no apology. "It is conclusion. The realm tires of war." Robert claimed the throne nonetheless, unwilling to squander the victory. Yet his crown sat uneasy with the North. Daenora and her son lived, rightful heirs by blood. Robert demanded Torrin handed over, for safe fosterage. Ned refused. "You would risk war again?" Robert fumed. "I would risk anything to honor the vows that bind husband to wife, father to child," Ned said. Their friendship balanced upon a knife's edge sharpened by grief for Lyanna, who by then lay dying in the Tower of Joy. Ned returned from Dorne carrying her body north, silent tears freezing on the winds over Moat Cailin. He built her cairn beside the Wolfswood pond she loved, and Winterfell's heart wept sap for her passing. Spring melted winter's grip. In the Godswood, Torrin toddled beneath apple blossoms. His hair showed streaks of snow white among brown, his eyes a curious gray-violet. Maester Luwin wrote carefully in his ledgers of the Boy of Ice and Fire, while lords visiting Winterfell saw in him either omen or opportunity. Daenora ruled the castle in Ned's absences, her council peppered with Karstarks and Mormonts, who gradually forgot she was once the blood of their ancient foes. She learned to ride shaggy northern garrons, to hawk grouse on the frost-shrouded moors, to breathe the still cold that wrapped the world at dawn like clean wool. Some nights she woke sweating from dreams of dragon fire, and Ned held her until her trembling ceased. Robert's reign stabilized, yet the uneasy stalemate with Winterfell frayed the realm's tapestry. Small folk wondered if a second rebellion simmered in snowbound silence. Lannister gold propped the throne, but Tywin eyed Winterfell like a lion scents wounded elk. Catelyn and Brandon wed, their union both balm and reminder. Cat bore a son, Rickon, a year after Torrhen. The boys played together under watchful eyes. Stark wolf with Targaryen wormwood woven through, stark wolf full-blooded and fierce. In King's Landing, Grand Maester Pycelle counseled Robert to demand Torrhen as hostage once more. Stannis Baratheon, stern and unyielding, advised war if Ned refused. Only Jon Arryn pleaded caution. Let the North be. Their winter will come sooner than ours, and they must feed their own. But when Robert fathered no legitimate heir upon Cersei Lannister, another failure in a marriage forged for politics, talk turned again to succession. If the king dies, murmured Varys to the small council, the realm shall look to the princes of dragon blood. Winterfell thus became more than a castle. It was a fulcrum on which rested the fate of 7 kingdoms. On a night when the wall's snows glowed blue in the moonlight, a raven came beating at a high window of Ned and Daenorah's solar. Its message bore the green wax of Highgarden. Lord Mace Tyrell proposed betrothal between his daughter Margaery and young Torrhen. Ned frowned. Daenorah considered. The Reach grows restless, she said. They seek to bind us, to tame the dragon before it flies. Ned stroked her hand. Will it fly? Daenorah's eyes reflected torchlight like twin comets. Dragons are born of magic as much as flesh. Perhaps our son is enough to wake them. Those words stirred not only hope but fear. In crypts beneath the first keep, Ned walked row upon row of granite kings, seeking wisdom in stony faces. He prayed to the old gods for guidance, and in the dead hush of the crypt, he felt ghostly flames lick the air, warming bone and dust. Ice and fire again, ever circling. The wall sent its own plea. Wildling raids increased, giants rumored awake, and sinister whispers of shadows moving south in blizzarding gales. Ned remembered tales of the long night and wondered whether all their Southron wars would prove meaningless when true darkness fell. He dispatched supplies and men to Castle Black, and Daenorah insisted Torrhen's dragonglass dagger, gift from Dragonstone's vaults, be shipped north as well. 9 years after the rebellion, Robert Baratheon rode to Winterfell with a grand retinue, all gold and velvet to contrast the stark gray walls. He wished to rekindle friendship, but also to see the boy many called the Last Dragon. Robert found Torrhen sparring with a wooden sword, giggling as he slipped blows past his cousin Rickon. The king's laughter boomed. He fights well for one so young, Robert said, clapping Ned's back. Yet later, wine-soft, he cornered his old friend in the Godswood. You must send him south. Raise him in my court, Ned. Make him my ward. It will bind our houses. Ned felt the Weirwood's red eyes on them both. And if I say no? Robert's jaw hardened. The jolly facade cracked to iron inside. Then I must ask whose heir you groom. The North's? Or the realm's? Beneath the flaming leaves, Ned saw the road fork once more. Yield Torrhen and risk the boy becoming a pawn of Lannister intrigue, or refuse and tempt war. But ice and fire both burn fierce over children. I swore to guard him, Ned answered. No one will take him while I draw breath. They parted colder than they arrived. Cersei's emerald stare branded Daenorah with jealousy. Joffrey sneered at Torrhen, who ignored him as one ignores a yapping hound. When the royal party departed, winter seemed to linger longer around Winterfell's walls, as though the old gods themselves anticipated blood. Blood came, but not from the south. A ranging party of brothers Black stumbled from the Wolfswood gibbous moonlit, mouths blue, words frozen mid-scream. Dead things in the snow, one whispered before his last breath. Ned sent ravens to King's Landing and Dragonstone, warning of White Walkers returning. Most lords scoffed. But among the ravens was one for Stannis Baratheon, now master of Dragonstone's ancient lore. Stannis read of dragonglass blades shattering ice demons and wrote back, "Send your son. Dragonstone's caves hold secrets born for his blood." Daenora read the letter thrice. "They want him everywhere," she said, torn between fear and fierce pride. Perhaps it is time he stepped beyond these walls. Ned's heart roared with reason. And if he never returns? Then he will have died forging the peace we swore our marriage would make. There is honor in that. In the end, Torhin chose for himself. At 9 he stood before his parents in the great hall, silver and brown hair falling across his earnest brow. "I will go, father," he said. "The realm must see that wolf and dragon are one." The hall fell silent, save for the crackle of a distant hearth. Ned stared at his son, this echo of two worlds, and felt both terror and awe. He knelt and fastened the dragonglass dagger, now set in a wolf-head hilt of pale weirwood, to Torrin's belt. "Then go with every lesson I have given you," he whispered, repeating the words Jon Arryn had offered him so many winters before. "Honor bends more easily than it breaks, but break it does when the fire grows hot enough." Torrin's smile was all winter-spring, cold and bright and full of promise. At Dragonstone, the boy walked halls carved by Valyrian sorcery, felt heat of dormant furnaces, listened to Stannis intone histories of Azor Ahai reborn. Red woman Melisandre observed him like a cat before a hearth, proclaiming visions of a sword aflame and a wolf crowned in moonlight. Torrin, undaunted, studied bladecraft by day and lore by candleglow, growing lean and sharp as a northern icicle tempered in southern sun. In King's Landing, Varys' whispers reached Cersei. "The North breeds a dragon prince," he said silkily. She pressed Robert to act, but the king, fattening on feast and guilt, hesitated. "It is enough," he grumbled. "That winters are long. I will not make them longer with war." Yet Cersei wrote in secret to her father. Tywin's lion awoke. Gold cloaks arrested small folk with northern accents. Coin passed to sellswords heading up the King's Road. Assassins were promised titles should dragon blood spill crimson upon snow. Ned learned of one such plot from a frightened stable boy and sent his own shadows to intercept. They caught the cutthroats near Moat Cailin. Their tongues ended in silent graves under peat. Even so, each attempt thickened the air with dread. Daenora bore a second child, a daughter she named Lyanna, to honor a sister never known. The babe's birth tempered some tension, yet rumors now told of 3-headed dragons stirring in womb-warm stone, called by the song of a Stark-born prince. 10 years to the day since their marriage, Eddard and Daenora stood upon Winterfell's outer wall at dawn. The sky blushed rose gold. In the east, a comet flared red. "Dragon's tail," old men muttered. From the south a horn sounded, a train of riders climbing the King's Road. First rode Torrin, taller than his father had been at 18, eyes bright as cold stars over Blackwater. Behind him came rows of carts, barrels sealed with glowing glyphs, crates of black stone, lengths of steel forged at Dragonstone's mountain forges. And nested on a wide wagon, trembling under chains of Valyrian steel, was an egg large as a man's torso, glimmering dark as onyx shot through with crimson veins. When Torrin dismounted, Daenora pressed him to her heart. Ned embraced his son only to feel the heat radiate off him like banked coals. "What have you brought me?" the Lord of Winterfell asked. "A spark," Torrin said. "Enough to drive the darkness back, or to consume us all if we falter." They carried the egg to the crypts, laying it before the statue of Brandon the Builder. Beneath flickering torches, Ned saw fractures of red light dance upon the stone faces of dead kings. Ice and fire, always circling. That night, as snows whispered outside Winterfell's walls and hearths burned low, a sound like cracking thunder woke the castle. The dragon egg split along glowing fault lines. Flames licked the air without consuming, swirling in shapes of wolves and serpents. From within emerged a hatchling as pale as morning frost, edged in blood-red scales, eyes like molten amethyst. Torrhen knelt. The creature climbed his outstretched arm, talons pricking but not drawing blood, wings unfurling with a quiet hiss. A hush fell, a moment strung between breath and heartbeat. Then the dragon uttered a cry that echoed across ramparts, a shivering note that seemed to call the very stars to witness. Daenora wept in fierce joy. Ned felt tears freeze upon his lashes. Somewhere far beyond, the wall groaned under forces unseen. In King's Landing, Robert stumbled from drunken sleep with heart hammering. On Dragonstone, Melisandre knelt in firelit chambers, whispering Azor Ahai. Winterfell's bells tolled, not in mourning but in herald. The Prince of Ice and Fire had hatched his first dragon. And across the frost-bitten realm, men realized that the breathing of the world had changed, deeper now, the lull before a storm that would decide dawn or endless night. Word spread faster than ravens could fly. The North had birthed a living dragon. Small folk prayed, lords schemed, maesters wrote frantic treatises on ancient prophecies. Tywin Lannister summoned armies. Stannis gathered ships armed with dragonglass ballistae. The faith militant revived old condemnations of Valyrian sorcery. Yet White Walkers also stirred north of the wall, glass swords glinting. Faced with twin dooms, ice-wrought dead and fire-forged wrath, and Stark called banners, but not to war against men. He marched for the wall, dragon at his son's shoulder, direwolves at their heels, Daenora beside him in silvered mail, her own sword catch-named Dawnfire. Knights of Vale and Reach rode behind. Even a few Lannister men set aside grudges, lured by the promise that the long night spared no one. Before they left, Ned stood once more under the heart tree, feeling its red-sapped gaze. "Honor bends," he whispered, "but does not break." The wind rustled crimson leaves in answer. A torch sputtered, sparks spiraling with snowflakes, ice and fire dancing as ever. He looked to Daenora, to Torrhen and Lyanna, to banners of stag and lion and rose mingling with wolf and dragon. And he dared believe that perhaps this marriage, forged in brittle fear, had become the realm's last best hope. Peace was still far, the darkness vast, but the road ahead glowed red gold with dragonfire lighting the snows. Honor, after all, only breaks if you let the fire climb too high. But if you ride the fire, if you teach it to fly on wings of ice-forged resolve, it might just burn a path not to ruin, but to a dawn no night can swallow. Snow flurried in restless spirals as the host set forth. The dawn a ghostly smear across a sky the color of tarnished steel. They marched in layered silence. Clop of hooves, creep of wagon wheels, hiss of breath frosting helms. The direwolves' ghost and gray wind ghosted ahead, twin wraiths weaving through drifts no man dared trust. Above them the hatchling dragon, named Skara by Torrhen, after the old tongue's word for dawn flame, circled on pearl and crimson wings, its cry a clarion that stitched together courage and dread. Ned rode at the vanguard with Daenora beside him, her silver hair braided tight against the wind. Around them flew the banners of the realm's uneasy alliance, the direwolf of Stark, the crowned stag of Baratheon, the fiery heart of Dragonstone, the sunflower of Tarly, the silver trout of Tully, even a scattering of red lions. Sir Kevin's men come without Tywin's leave, unwilling to watch winter devour their children for the sake of an old grudge. Farther back, bronze-armored mountain clans from the Vale trudged in shaggy cloaks. Behind them marched a wedge of black brothers recalled by Lord Commander Corgil to swell the depleted garrisons of the wall. On the fifth day, they crossed the last river at the ford of Ol One-Eye, where mist lay thick as wool. Torrhen rode ahead on a shaggy white destrier. Skara perched upon the pommel of his saddle like a living standard. The men whispered each night that the boy's eyes had grown brighter, reflecting embers even when no fire burned, and that the dragon's scales darkened toward deepest garnet, as if feeding upon something unseen in the northern air. Campfires punctured the dark like scattered constellations. Around them, lords haggled over supplies, sparring with words because steel against each other now would doom them all. Ned kept councils brief, wary of the tempers that crackled beneath their forced camaraderie. Robert had remained in King's Landing to guard a southern realm fraying at its seams, but Stannis rode with the host, flint-jawed and word-poor, trusting in dragonglass and the prophecy Melisandre clutched like a strangler vine. The Red Priestess herself traveled by covered palanquin, scent of strange incense leaking through slitted shutters. Each dawn found the column thinner. Men deserted, unnerved by half-heard howls that drifted from brush-choked hollows. Cooks discovered barrels of salt beef spoiled to black mush overnight. One morning, the rear guard found a sentry frozen against a tree, eyes pale as moonstones, save that his pupils glimmered icy blue. They burned the corpse on a pyre of pine. Even so, the flames hissed and sputtered, reluctant, until Torrhen approached. Skara loosed a thin jet of fire bright as molten gold, and the body collapsed into ash. Word of that miracle spread faster than fear could chase it. Men who'd grumbled about marching under a dragon banner now pressed closer, eager for a glimpse of the boy and his bright-winged shadow. Sir Davos Seaworth muttered that miracles were the slipperiest of loyalties. Men adored them until the next darkness asked for payment. But his voice was small against the tide of newfound faith. 3 days south of the Gift they reached Long Barrow, where the land sloped like a sleeping giant beneath a dusting of snow. There a rider came galloping from the north, black cloak streaming. It was Benjen Stark, leaner than winter birch, cheeks raw from wind. He reined before Ned, breath smoking. "They are no longer content to skulk behind the Frostfangs," he said without preamble. A party of rangers vanished near the Milkwater. We found only shattered swords and trails of dragged footprints leading north. The wildlings flee south in tides. Tormund, Harma, Rattleshirt, all driving their people toward the wall, like cattle before a storm. Ned studied his brother's eyes, seeing nights with no sleep in their depths. How many died? All of them. Benjen's voice cracked around the words. And the tracks showed no horse prints. The dead walked, Ned. Gods help me. They marched in perfect order. Nender. That evening the commanders gathered beneath Ned's pavilion. Stannis spread a map upon a table, stones anchoring its corners. "We cannot drag this host piecemeal through molehills of snow and hope to meet the enemy in tidy line-to-line fashion. We must strike hard where they are weakest." "And where is that?" asked Sir Brynden Tully. His sharp eyes missed little, but even he could not trace enemy formations made of wind and death. "The Nightfort," Benjen said. Ghost scouts glimpsed shapes moving through its ancient breach. "If the walkers pass the wall, they will pour into the Gift before we can reposition. We must cut them there." "Thou." Stannis tapped the map. "Daw. Then here we drive our spear. Lord Stark, take the vanguard, and Torrhen with your dragon. Sir Kevan's lions will hold your western flank, Tarly the east. My ships are useless this far inland, but I'll march dragonglass reserves to Castle Black to arm the garrison. Should your line fail, we make last stand at the gorge." Ned's gaze fell upon the squiggle marking the Nightfort, a bleak ruin remembered in children's tales of onion-eyed rats and crying stone. "We strike first," he said, "but we do not fail." Daenora laid her hand upon his. "Ice holds memory," she whispered. "Ours is to teach it new songs." They reached the wall at first light on the 14th day, a sheer white immensity that devoured the sky. Frostbreath winds keened round its flanks, and even the boldest lord went hushed at its foot. Castle Black bustled with frantic purpose. Carts unloaded dragonglass arrowheads, smiths hammered rings for chain-slick armor, ravens flapped in and out like scraps of night torn by unseen talons. Samwell Tarly, once soft, now tempered by northern hardship, guided Ned and Daenora through a warren of makeshift forges. "We melt volcanic obsidian with grease and bone meal," he explained, pushing up fogged spectacles. Brother Donal found the recipe in an old ranger's journal. It coats steel like glass, but shatters on impact within the wound. His excited eyes dimmed when he added, "Almost every test ended with the target flailing, as if the blade burned from within." Torrhen stood among the Black brothers, helping hammer arrowheads, sparks flaring about his gloves. Skara roosted on a beam overhead, uninterested in mortal craft. When he saw his parents, he pushed sweat-matted hair from his brow and grinned. "Father," Ghost ran down a deer larger than Hodor. We feast tonight. Ned squeezed the boy's shoulder, pride bittersweet. Let us dine well. The morrow may feed us only on steel. That night they gathered in the old shield hall, banners draped over soot-black rafters. Stannis sat rigid, Melisandre at his elbow, flame-tongued shadows skipping across her red silk. Benjen toasted Ned in hard northern ale. Sir Davos traded sea tales with Sir Kevan. Daenora slipped from her chair to kneel beside Torrhen, murmuring dragon lullabies older than Aegon's conquest. Ned rose and silence fell soft as snow. He spoke of the last long night, of Bran the Builder and the forging of the wall, then of the price of peace paid in blood. His father and brother burnt, Robert's children dead, kingships won on fields seeded with bones. Tonight we stand at the wheel's rim, he said. If it breaks, none shall know dawn. We must hold. Not for thrones, not for sigils, but for the breath we share. He lifted his cup. To the dawn. To the dawn, echoed voices across the hall, and the rafters thundered with tankards raised. Outside, unseen, snow drifted deeper, burying old tracks and laying new audio. The column marched at midnight, torches guttering. Climbing the switchback path to the Nightfort felt like ascending the spine of some vast white beast. The gate was a jagged hole, punched centuries ago by time and neglect. Within the courtyard weeds bowed under powdery dunes, and the well in which Mad Axe murdered his brothers yawned like a black pupil. They found tracks, three-toed, thin as knives, glowing faintly cerulean under Skara's breath. Benjen knelt, pressing a glove to the imprint. Hours old, he whispered. They've passed within. Daenora drew dawnfire, the blade's narrow fuller catching starlight in pale blue gleam. Ned unsheathed ice, its Valyrian ripples oily in the gloom. Torrhen stepped forward. Skara leaping skyward. The dragon perched atop a broken parapet, wings mantling. A horn blast cut the hush. From the breach beyond the far tower came movement, first whisking snow eddies, then shapes congealing, gaunt figures garbed in what may once have been leather and mail. Skin translucent as hoarfrost stretched over bone. Eyes burned cold sapphire. They advanced in silent ranks, blades of pale crystal shedding no condensation. Behind them, slouched corpses in ill-mended black, faces slack, joints jerking like marionettes on tangled strings. The horn blew again, 3 blasts. Rangers called from ramparts. Archers unleashed flights of dragonglass-tipped arrows. They shattered on the walkers' mirrored armor with tinging cracks, leaving slivers embedded that smoked with cold. A few others staggered, but most pressed on. Torrhen strode to meet them, Skara diving from the wall. The dragon inhaled, fire roared. A thin geyser, not yet furnace-hot like adult breath, but white-blue and blinding. It tore through the first rank, ice blades melting into steam, bodies exploding to crystalline dust. Men cheered, until a walker lifted a hand, and blue light rippled. Sudden frost washed over Skara's fire, snuffing it to mist. The hatchling shrieked, faltering midair. Ned shouted, "Shields up!" Northern spearmen locked wall, bracing. The clash came like winter's hammer. Steel rang. Dragonglass splintered. When ice met and others soared, the air screeched and sparks of twilight burst. The crystal blade shattered. The walker dissolved into scatter of rime. But Ned's arms numbed to the elbow. To his right, Daenora slipped inside another's guard, dawnfire slashing. The Valyrian edge burned blue-orange where it touched crystal, carving through cuirass, torso, spine in one fluid arc. She pivoted, hair whipping, eyes fierce. Stannis men flooded the breach, hurling glass-headed spears. Sir Kevan jammed a flaming brand into the maw of a white clambering for his throat. Still they poured, endless as tide. Torrhen knelt beside Skara, cradling the dragon's body, its chest heaving, scales frosted white over red. "Come on, girl," he whispered, tears freezing on his eyelashes. A walker advanced, pale blade raised. Torrin thrust his dragonglass dagger. The walker parried, slicing the dagger clean in half. Crack! The remaining shard buried in the creature's foot. Bluish smoke hissed. The other reeled. Light flared. Melisandre striding across the courtyard, hair a scarlet banner. From her gloved palm she flung liquid fire, a red coil that struck the walker, bursting into roaring swirl. The other screamed, a sound like wind through a graveyard gate, and collapsed into flaming chunks. I saw this in the flames, she declared, voice echoing beyond mortal throat. Azor Ahai wields steel neither dark nor light, but born anew in dragon's breath. Torrin's eyes widened. He pressed his broken dagger against Skara's warm throat. Breathe, he commanded. The dragon's pupils slitted, and a tremor passed through its chest. Small flame licked the shard, fusing blade and hilt with molten glass. When Torrin raised it, the dagger's fracture glowed orange, veins of fire writhing beneath black obsidian like living thing. Benjen bellowed, "To the boy!" Rangers closed around Torrin, carrying him toward the thickest scrum. The moment the flaming dagger sank into a walker's chest, the creature erupted, a miniature sun flash bleaching every shadow. Torrin whirled, slashing. Where the blade touched, others burst. Chain reaction of fire and rime. Men rallied, shouting thunder. Ned cleaved with ice. Daenora danced her lethal ballet. Stannis drove lines onward. The courtyard became a kaleidoscope of flame, snow, ash. Finally, the shimmering tide faltered. Walkers retreating in coordinated withdrawal. Whites crumpling lifeless where puppet strings were cut. An eerie stillness settled, broken only by a hiss of melting frost. But victory tasted thin as river ice. Dead covered the stones, friends and foes alike. Lord Karstark lay felled by a crystal spear. Sir Brynden knelt beside Edmure, staunching a thigh wound. Melisandre collapsed to knees, pale with blood loss from a gash across her ribs. Yet the wall still stood, and beyond its foot the white world stretched quiet. For now. Ned gathered surviving commanders in the Nightfort's ruined feast hall, torchlight pooling on cracked flagstones. The air smelled of iron and burnt pine resin. "We've bloodied their vanguard," he said, voice coarse. But it was a test. The true storm gathers yet. Namd and Segar. Benjen spoke next, describing sightings of massive figures. Ice giants, shadowing the forest roads. And a walker clad in armor black as void, he added, riding a stag of ice. Some wildlings call him the frostborn king. Stannis frowned. Prophecy names no such king. Prophecy is a mirror, Daenora answered. Turn it, and new faces emerge. She paced the hall, each step echoing. We need allies unconstrained by walls or thrones. We must parley with the wildlings. Stannis bristled. Rebels and raiders? They spilled southern blood. Betrothal, sir. Yet they bleed the dead more often, Ned said. And they know the land beyond the frost fangs. Sent an envoy. Who? Kevin asked. Torrin rose. Shoulders squared. I will go. A murmur rippled. Ned's heart jerked, but in his son's eyes he saw a determination older than either house. You will take Ghost, 6 rangers, and dragonglass enough to arm 1,000, Ned said. Find Tormund, Giantsbane. Offer him what we can, land south of the gift for his people, if they stand with us. Bring him back. And that night Ned visited the crypt of the Nightfort's old kings, a damp cavern of broken sarcophagi. He knelt before a nameless effigy toppled by frost and time. Father, he whispered, though no Stark Lord lay here, guide the boy. He carries the hope of ice and fire. Wind moaned through cracks in the stone. Whether it answered he could not tell. Torrin's party slipped through the great gate at dawn, disappearing into wilderness. Days crawled. Nights lingered endless. Scouts brought rumors. The frostborn king rallied walkers behind a banner of black snowflakes. Weirwood trees north of the Milkwater bled sap like frozen tears. Lord Tarley drilled archers until their fingers blistered. Stannis supervised fiery runework upon trebuchet stones. Daenora oversaw healing tents, her presence calming wounds as surely as any maester's salve. On the seventh night, a blizzard boiled over the wall, swallowing moon and star. Snow lashed like white chains. Tents shuddered. Fires died strangled. From the gloom came shrieks neither human nor beast, the dead assaulting under cover of the storm. They flowed across the frozen river at the base of the wall, white hordes clambering like iron-shod ants. Ned took the western parapet, Daenora the eastern. Archers loosed. Barrel bombs of wildfire shrieked down, casting green furnaces that melted paths through ice-packed ranks. Yet every fallen corpse rose again, blue eyes blazing. Up the wall, Melisandre raised her hands and chanted. The snow above her reddened, swirling into a vortex that hammered downward as burning sleet. Where it struck, walkers screamed. But the red priestess sagged with each invocation, skin paling to parchment. A horn sounded thrice. From the south. Ned nearly dropped his sword, then turned, and glimpsed torches bobbing through the storm. A column of shaggy wildlings, pelts flapping, axes gleaming blue with frost. At their head rode Torrhen, cloak snapped to shreds, Skara perched tall and unwavering. Beside him loped a bear-sized direwolf, ghost, amber eyes fixed upon the climb ahead. Behind Torrhen strode giants, bearded, tusked, hauling trunks of uprooted pine as clubs. Tormund roared, "Open your bloody gates, crows!" And the Night's Watch did, sliding massive iron bolts just long enough for the wildlings to pour through. They joined the fight without pause, giants hurling rocks the size of wagons, spearmen stabbing up from vantage poles, mammoths trampling reanimated corpses into slush. Torrhen and Skara flew, dragonfire weaving molten ribbons through the gale. Flames met drifting snow in sizzling clouds. Men cheered every burst like the first breath after drowning. Below, Benjen spied the frostborn king advancing, a towering figure wreathed in black frost. Upon his horned helm, a shard of purple crystal glowed with each kill his minions claimed. He strode toward the wall's base, ice stag stamping void-black hooves. Each step raised spikes of rime. Through swirling ice his gaze locked upon Torrhen. Dorindova, dagger, blazing. But the frostborn king raised a spear wrought of darkest crystal. He hurled it, an arc of night slicing the storm, and it struck Skara's wing joint. Dragon shrieked, blood hissed to crimson vapor, wing folding. They spiraled down, crashing onto an ice shelf halfway down the wall's outer face. Ned's heart wrenched. Without thought, he gripped a coil of rope and hurled himself over the parapet, rappelling toward his son. Daenora mirrored him a tower away, dawnfire strapped to her back, eyes ablaze. The frostborn king began climbing, ice forming handholds that melted beneath him, yet solidified above as he rose. Below, whites swarmed, piling bodies into mounds to reach Ned's rope. Benjen swung down to fend them off. Stannis and Davos loosed grappling lines to pull wounded archers to safety. The giants jammed pine logs into breaches. Torrhen knelt beside Skara, cradling her head. The dragon wheezed, blue flame licking the wound, but failing to cauterize. Snow gathered, burying them inch by inch. Torrhen's teeth chattered more from grief than cold. "You must fly," he whispered. "The world needs you." Skara's nictitating membrane slid once. Affection. Apology. Then her eyes dim. Her last breath plumed silver and went still. A howl broke from Torrhen's chest, raw and wolven. The dragon's body began to glow, veins brightening beneath translucent red scale. Ice cracked in a widening halo as heat poured outward. Ned reached his son then, seizing him. "Torrhen!" But the boy's gaze had gone distant, fixed upon something beyond sight. Light burst, blood and gold conflagration shooting into the storm cloud, ripping heaven from earth. The dragon's body disintegrated into motes that swirled around Torrhen, fusing with the broken dagger, coating his mail, melting into his skin. The frostborn king hesitated. Spear raised, as the storm itself paused, winds drawing inward like lungs. Daenora swung onto the shelf. Ice cracked. She staggered, blinded by brilliance. Ned shielded her just as the light collapsed inward, plunging everything into instant darkness, save for Torren. He rose, eyes twin hearths behind pupils of molten gold. From his fists dripped liquid flame that hardened into a longsword of gleaming obsidian, streaked with living fire. Runes not seen since Valyria's doom danced along the blade. He stepped forward, leaving footprints that glowed, yet the surrounding ice did not melt, only shimmered. The frostborn king snarled, raising his spear again. Torren merely raised a palm. The spear exploded into shards that boiled away mid-air. He advanced, each stride marked by a pulse of silent thunder. The king swung gauntleted hand. A scythe of shadow flew. Torren flicked his sword, severing the darkness, and in that cut echoed the chime of 1,000 bells riven at once. They met at the midpoint of the wall. Sword in claw, fire and void, ringing blows that shattered ancient ice and shook snowslides from distant cliffs. Below, wights halted mid-charge, their conjurers will consumed by the duel. Men watched, breathless. Torren drove the sword through the king's chest, rhyme spiderwebbed, then fractured. A gout of blue light screamed skyward. Yet the king clamped iron claws onto the blade, tugging Torren close. Their faces inches apart, one aflame, one frozen. They locked gazes. Icy whisper slithered. "I am the night that never ends," Torren answered in a voice resonant as furnace roar. "Then dawn is my birthright." He wrenched the sword upward, slicing through helm, skull, stag antlers alike. A burst of blinding radiance flared, white deeper than any dark, then vanished. The frostborn king collapsed, body crumbling to black snowflakes that scattered in silent wind. At once, the storm unraveled. Clouds fled like frightened crows, stars glittering. On the field below, walkers froze mid-stride, then cracked apart. Wights sank lifeless. Only the sigh of settling snow remained. Ned pulled Torren into his arms. The boy trembled, eyes resuming their normal gray-violet, flames receding from his skin. The sword, no longer molten, resolved into dark glass, runes dull. Torren blinked up at his father. "Is it over?" "For tonight," Ned said, voice thick. "For tonight, the dawn holds." Daenora knelt, pressing her brow to Torren's. Tears streaked her cheeks, freezing. "Your dragon." "She is within the blade now," Torren whispered. "Fire bound to ice, never apart again." They climbed back to the parapet as east deepened toward sunrise. Melisandre watched, lips curved in rapturous smile. "Azor Ahai," she breathed. But Stannis shook his head at that. Whether in surrender or relief, none could tell. Below, wildlings and crows, lions and stags gathered around bonfires of walker fragments, mingling in shared awe. Tormund slapped Benjen's shoulder hard enough to bruise, declaring the wall of ice finally worth a wildling's spit. Morning's first light crested the horizon. Clear, sharp, revealing a world glazed fresh and silent. Where the frostborn king fell, a single tree sprouted. Trunk of pale crystal, leaves of red flame that did not burn. It stood rooted in ice yet alive, a living testament. Ned gazed upon it and felt the turn of age's hinge. "This is only the beginning," he murmured. Torren nodded, weary yet unbroken. "Beginnings are where hope lies, father." Around them, men set down swords, unstrung bows, and for one breath all the 7 kingdoms stood in unspoken truce beneath a sky no longer sundered by shadow. The wall still loomed, but its stone seemed less burdened, as though remembering its old oath. To guard realms of men, not divide them. As the sun breached, its golden arc bathed the host in warmth that carried nothing of summer, yet hinted at seasons reborn. Ned clasped Daenora's hand, feeling her pulse steady beneath his thumb. Together they watched light etch their son's silhouette, the sword of dawn slung across his back, and understood that peace, true peace, was not a gift bestowed by crowns or conquests. It was forged, in moments such as this, upon anvils of unimaginable cost. And as crows wheeled overhead and direwolves howled greeting to the coming day, the child of ice and fire turned toward whatever future his flame-forged destiny would demand. The dawn at his heels, the long night broken, at least for a little while. Dawn's pale gold deepened into the fuller, clearer light of morning, soft fires of sunlight creeping across the battered battlements and stained, creaking winches. The smell that rose with it was not only smoke and melted snow, but the fresher, unexpected aroma of thawing earth. A smell Ned Stark had not sensed this close to the wall in all his years. Each lungful carried a quiet promise. The long night was truly broken, if only for a season measured by men, and not by the vast, unfeeling turn of the cosmic wheel. When relief loosened the first fingers from sword hilts, exhaustion rushed to fill the vacuum. Men who had stood on the frost-slick heights for half a night straight now swayed like half-felled oaks. Only adrenaline, and the shared knowledge that retreat meant immediate death, had kept them upright. Now, with the frostborn king fallen and his army shattered, sinews trembled, knees buckled, and more than one grizzled veteran fell asleep right where he stood, face pressed into the wall's freezing stones as though they were soft straw. Yet none slept long. Even in victory, the host still camped at the Empire's ragged edge, hemmed by spectral memories and the bones of all that had died beneath this colossal glacier. Fires needed stoking, wounded, stitching, and the dead, too many of them, required pyres before night brought the cold back in force. A funeral in daylight felt obscene after so much darkness, but Ned insisted. Wood was hauled, soaked tar poured, and Maester Aemon, brought up from his sickbed by sheer stubbornness, intoned the old knight's watchwords over each row of corpses. Black cloak or wildling furs, Southron plate or rough northern mail, it made no difference. Every body burned, and every pyre swirled with ashes that danced toward a sky scrubbed clean of storm clouds. Torrin helped carry bodies, the glass-fire sword slung in a crude sheath of boiled leather, its runes still faintly warm against his back. The lad's eyes were rimmed with bruised fatigue, yet he did not stop. Greywind and Ghost paced at his side in silent guard, and Skara's absence trailed him like a phantom limb. When the last pyre caught, Torhin stood before it, face numb with heat and cold both, and whispered a single Valyrian word Ned could not catch. Flame burst higher, as if answering. No wind stirred the boy's hair. Instead, the fire bent toward him, curling into the shape of a small dragon before collapsing into sparks. Daenora was everywhere, kneeling beside grief-struck men, soothing a giant who had lost half a hand, or cradling infants the free folk carried in crude slings. The wildlings had fled the dark with more than weapons. There were children born on the march, mothers whose screams of labor had mingled with the wails of wights. Now these same babes gurgled in the lee of the wall, alive to see a son their ancestors had feared might never rise again. Daenora bathed each forehead in melted snow. She scented with a sprig of northern juniper, murmuring lullabies that once belonged to Valyrian palaces. Even the flint-eyed clansmen of Then looked on, uneasy but transfixed. Stannis Baratheon remained as stone-stiff as ever, yet Ned noticed his shoulders unknotted fractionally each time the Red Priestess walked near. Melisandre limped, her wound reopened by the earlier strain, but she moved as though some hidden fire kept her bones alight. When she passed the fiery tree that had sprouted from the frostborn king's remains, placed one bloody hand upon its trunk, and whispered. Flames in its crystalline leaves brightened, then calmed all at once, as though acknowledging old kinship. Later, when Davos approached with a worried scowl, she merely nodded and said, "I have seen 1,000 endings in the flames. Onion Knight, this is the first that feels like a beginning." Letters flew out from Castle Black so thickly that one awkward steward joked the ravens might decide to unionize in protest. Ned wrote each personally, the quill-biting parchment with brisk strokes. To Robert in King's Landing, to John Arryn, and Brynden Tully in the Vale, to Howland Reed in his misty fen. He described the victory but spared no one the cost. And between the sober lines he threaded a second message. the truth that alliances forged on frozen battlements must not be allowed to melt in the warmth of southern halls. Robert's reply arrived within a week. Rare parchment scented faintly of arbor gold, half the ink blotched. The words lurched between boisterous relief and simmering resentment that Ned, not the king, had stood in the hour of triumph. Yet Robert pledged coin for rebuilding the watch, offered pardons to free folk who swore the crown's peace, and ended with a line scratched almost illegibly. "I will ride north come summer, God's willing. Bring the boy and his blade. I would see them with mine own eyes." Tywin Lannister's silence was louder than Raven's wings, but Sir Kevin confided one night beside a sputtering brazier that the lions of Casterly Rock would not march against Torrhen now. Too many songs already spread in the markets. Songs of a dragon wolf prince who'd saved the realm while Lord Tywin guarded his coffers. "Father despises being the fiend in a bard's first verse," Kevin admitted, scratching a furrow in the snow with his boot. "He will wait. Sharpen other blades." The greatest uncertainty lay among the free folk. Tormund Giantsbane, thick-bodied as a small bear, met with Ned, Benjen, and Stannis beneath the cracked vault of the Nightfort's kitchens, cauldrons still hanging like rusted moons. Melisandre stood in the shadows like a stitched flame on black cloth, but she spoke only once, to warn that vengeance festers longer than winter's stew. Tormund folded arms like felled logs across his chest. "My people lost half their strength getting here, Crow," he rumbled to Ned. "But they gained a tale stronger than steel." He jerked a thumb toward Torrhen, who waited outside the door, sword hilt sparking in torchlight. "That pup melted death, but they'll starve come next moon unless you let us till fields south o' the gift." Ned held his ground. "The gift is yours to farm if you'll swear guest right and king's peace." Tormund grinned, teeth flashing. "Peace. Aye. But king? Which one, Crow? The stag who drinks his brains sour, the wolves who howl oaths, or the fire queen of Winterfell?" "Ben?" Silence cracked, brittle. Stannis' jaw worked. Ned answered, "The king who keeps bread in every belly and the night at the wall. Whichever man, or woman, can manage that has Northmen's loyalty. We learned tonight that a crown rings hollow in a world, asleep beneath snow." Tormund considered, thumb combing his beard. Finally he spat into his meaty palm, held it out. "Then we'll sow your gift, Stark, so long as nobody down south tells my grandchildren what names they're to pray." When Ned clasped the giant hand, the new age began, raw, calloused, and full of unscribed peril. Winterfell's gates opened for them in a hush unlike any welcome Ned had ever received. There was cheering, yes, and tears, but also a heavy reverence, as though the returning host bore raw lightning across their shoulders. Torrhen dismounted first, aiding Daenora down from her mare, and the courtyard fell into silence at the sight of the glass-fire sword, cradled against his back. When Lyanna toddled into her brother's arms, both children haloed by soft northern sunlight, even hardened men swallowed lumps in their throats. Inside the great hall, banners had been rehung. Stark direwolf entwined with Targaryen dragons, fine needlework by winter-bound ladies whose nimble fingers had prayed in silk for an outcome none could nudge. Catelyn Stark, cat no longer Tully, for Brandon's death at Harrenhal had broken her betrothal, greeted Daenora with a hesitant kiss on each cheek. A year later, Catelyn would wed Ned's half-brother Benjen in a ceremony smaller than any the castle had hosted in a century. For now she hovered on the edge of new family, uncertain but determined to fit. In the first council that followed, Maester Luwin presented a ledger of grain stores perilously low. Too many livestock had been slaughtered to feed the march north. Without fresh harvest or significant trade, Winterfell risked hunger before first frost. Plans were laid. Free folk under Tormund would clear abandoned holdfasts south of the wall. Northern lords would send seed grain, trusting next year's harvest. Daenora arranged to sail merchant galleys from Braavos loaded with barley, their captains paid in promises of northern furs and Valyrian glass trinkets. Torrhen sat through every hour, quiet but attentive, absorbing the calculus of survival that often felt more exhausting than war. Nights brought subtler challenges. Torrin woke often from dreams where Skara still screamed, the wing wound weeping blue frost. Once Ned found him barefoot in the godswood at midnight, snow painting his ankles, sword blazing dimly like banked coals as the boy hacked at invisible foes among the roots. Ned eased the blade from shaking hands and held him until dawn. Bleak green leaves rustled overhead, whispering secrets that might have been comfort or cruelty. Daenora dug herself into every facet of northern life, trading quarrels with old Nan over variations in ancient tales, riding with Lyanna balanced before her on a shaggy pony, coaxing the castle's forge to experiment with a blend of northern steel and Valyrian glass. The first dagger they produced, half translucent and shot through with crimson veins, cut through heavy bear hide as easily as quill through parchment. Sir Donal Waynwood of the Vale called it bloodglass, and the name stuck. Quietly, Ned began arming his household guard with the new alloy. Word arrived from King's Landing. Robert's long-delayed progress north would start come midsummer. Rumors accompanied the Raven, Baratheon coffers running dry, Lannisters withholding loans, whispers that Queen Cersei's twins resembled not their father's black curls, but their Uncle Jaime's gold. Ned skimmed those lines and felt the old, familiar pinch between his brows. The realm was tilting again, soon to demand a steadying hand. And here he stood, Lord of Winterfell, father to the one boy whose blood might calm or ignite the fracturing kingdom. The royal procession reached Moat Cailin in a torrent of summer rain that turned roads to sucking clay. Huge wheeled wagons loaded with southern luxuries bogged axle deep. Robert raged. Cersei sneered. And Tyrion Lannister, traveling with the party as his father's envoy. Ned rode south with a modest escort to meet them in an oak-ringed field, where midges swarmed their horses' flanks. The reunion with Robert was loud, profane, and damp with tears neither man would admit. 2 days later, the procession crested Winterfell's ridge at sunset. From the battlements Torrin watched the serpentine line of bright banners, the sight oddly small compared to his memories of the wall. Skara's empty place at his shoulder ached, but he squared his spine. Daenora laid a reassuring hand on his. Lyanna snuggled in her arm, fat toddler fingers clutching a dragon-stitched kerchief. In the great hall, the preliminary toasts were stiff. Robert eyed Daenora with naked suspicion, then softened when she pressed a silver goblet into his palm and quoted, "Perfectly," the first line of a bawdy song had taught Ned years earlier in the Vale. Cersei whispered vicious jokes to her ladies, but kept her golden mask intact. Only Sir Jaime looked openly intrigued, studying Torrin's sword as though calculating how many beats it would take to disarm the boy. The council the next morning cut through pleasantry. Robert wanted Torrin as squire. Cersei insisted he learn courtly manners in the Red Keep. Tywin's letter, read aloud by Tyrion, suggested Torrin undertake an apprenticeship at Casterly Rock's mines to foster industry. Ned refused all politely. Torrin himself spoke last, voice calm, though hands trembled beneath the table. "I serve the wall," he said. "My blade's fire kindled there. Until its stones are mended and its watch secure, I remain in the north." Robert's scowl deepened, but he was not deaf to the shift in breeze. Tales of Torrin's feat had reached even flea-ridden inns at the Storm's End docks. Bards already styled him Aemon Reborn and the White Dragon. Cutting the boy away from Winterfell could smell too much like envy. The king compromised. Torhen would accompany the royal hosts on a tour of northern keeps, nothing more. Ned conceded, albeit with 100 Wolfsguard men sworn to his son's side. Before they set out, the glass-fire sword caught Cersei's eye. She asked to hold it. Torrin, under Ned's silent nod, presented the blade hilt first. Her fingers closed, and she hissed, dropping it. A thin scorch line rode her palm. Tyrion, watching, raised one brow. "Seems it shares your temperament, sister. Burns hot at the slightest touch." Cersei's smile was thin enough to slice parchment. That night, 2 of the Wolfsguard died of mysteriously sour mead. Ned quietly doubled Torrin's escort, and sent private ravens east to Dragonstone, west to Pike, and north to Bear Island, updating allies on the shifting game board. The royal tour meandered. At Deepwood Motte, Asha Greyjoy, hostage award turned brusque adventurer, sparred Torrhen with wooden staves until splinters flew and admiration bloomed. In White Harbor, Lord Manderley invited the party onto a 3-decked cog festooned with myriads of lanterns. Daenora danced with cyst-scabbed dockside children and later convinced Wyman to sell captured pirate slaves their freedom for a single blood-glass dagger. Songs about Lady Dragon's gift spread down the Mander faster than fish rot. South at Barrowton, Robert drank himself sick on strong cider, and Ned found him after midnight weeping beside the ancient barrow of Rowena Stark, fantasy and grief melding in equal measure. "I see her," Robert confessed, voice thick, "in every flame, in every brown-eyed wench, and now in your wife's child, because the eyes are almost Lyanna's, but they look at me like I'm the enemy." Ned gathered his friend up, same as the night Lyanna died, and realized some wounds never scab. Meanwhile, rumors of dragon eggs circulated. Copper-haired merchants arriving from the east spoke breathlessly of a dozen petrified shells found in the smoking ruins of Illyria. Melisandre, receiving the tidings at Castle Black, wrote to Daenora, "3 hearts to bind 3 heads, or the wheel spins again to break us all." Daenora's fingers trembled reading it. Autumn brushed the treetops with rust when the procession returned north. Robert lingered at Winterfell, reluctant to face southern intrigues. One crisp night, a hush lay over the Godswood, moon hanging like a sliver of polished bone, when Robert proposed a final hunt to mark his visit. A monstrous white-tusked boar had been ravaging crofter plots beyond the last river. The king swore he'd fell it with one cast of his heavy spear and invited Torrhen to witness. Ned argued caution, not superstitious but wary of foreshadow. The old gods loved to carve into simple acts. Yet Torrhen's eagerness won. At dawn, a small party rode out. Robert, Ned, Torrhen, Renly, Sir Barristan, and 3 gnarled hunters who knew the deep woods. They tracked the boar 2 days. Snow's first dust powdered pine boughs when they cornered the beast in a ravine choked with briars. Robert's spear struck, but high, skimming shoulder. The boar screamed, turned, and charged. For a breath everything froze. The animal's bulk barreling. Robert slipping on frost, spear haft splintering. Torrhen moved faster than thought. The blood-glass sword flashed from its sheath, inscribed runes pulsing bright in snowy gloom. He stepped between boar and king, blade lancing through shaggy throat. Steam and blood sprayed. The boar pitched sideways, thrashing, then lay still. Silence shattered into Robert's hoarse laughter. He clapped Torrhen so hard the boy nearly staggered. "Dragon pup does it again," he boomed. Grin broad, yet beneath it Ned saw the flicker. Relief, but also a king's pride rebuke. Later, while the carcass was dressed, Robert stood apart, eyes narrow on the boy who'd saved his life. Ned joined him. "He's your son, in every way that matters," Robert said quietly. "But dragons don't bend their necks forever." "If Torrhen flies," Ned responded, "I pray he chooses clear skies." Robert grunted, gaze heavy. "A dragon prince and a northern throne. Old tales smell blood on that wind." Winter came early. Snow feathered the world, muffling laughter and sharpening screams. Ships bound for the south foundered on brazen storms. A sickness born of damp lungs crept through Crannog villages. In King's Landing, various little birds chirped of famine riots and Tyrell envoys whispering roses and daggers. Robert at last had to depart, dragged home by duties heavier than any boar spear. He left Winterfell with hand clasps, sloppy vows of friendship renewed, and a pregnant fear no tankard could drown. A week later, a slender galley flying a red sunburst moored at White Harbor. Its captain bore silk-wrapped bundles of volcanic stone. 3 dragon eggs, veins glimmering like molten gold beneath ash-black shell. "They were tribute," the captain said, "for the boy who slew the long night." None in Valyria dared keep them after sailors whispered that shadows circled the hull each night, cooing in lost tongues. The crew had prayed relief would come if the gift was delivered where destiny pointed. Ned weighed the eggs in gloved hands. They pulsed with faint warmth. Torrhen's eyes lit, fear and hope intermingled. Daenora's mouth formed a silent prayer. Maester Luwin worried aloud about sorcery. Stannis, visiting to discuss watch funding, demanded they be sent to Dragonstone for safekeeping. Melisandre arrived 3 days later, under black sails, and declared the eggs must hatch beneath a bleeding star if the world was to know true dawn. That night, the sky answered. A meteor shower streamed green and silver across the firmament, and one fragment, red as a wound, streaked directly over Winterfell, tail spluttering like hot blood on snow. It vanished beyond the Wolfswood with a sound like a giant's heartbeat. Torrhen took the eggs into the Godswood alone. Ned followed unseen. The boy knelt at the heart tree, runes of his sword glowing. He sliced his palm, letting blood spatter each shell. "Rise," he whispered, voice shaking. The heart tree's face wept sap. Meteoric light flickered overhead. The first egg answered, cracking with a sigh of steam, revealing wings the color of shadow and flame. The second followed, scales blue-white as the wall's dawn. The third lay unbroken, hard as iron, but Torrhen pressed his brow to its cool shell and promised patience. When the hatchlings crawled onto his arms, Ned stepped from concealment, yet the sight froze him. Dragons, small as barn kittens, nestled beneath direwolf sigils and weirwood branches. Winterfell, seat of the old gods, had become cradle of Valyrian flame. Daenora entered, eyes shining, and Ned understood their path diverged from anything the Seven Kingdoms had imagined. Wolf and dragon, ice and fire. Their union had hurled the sky's forge upon the earth, rewriting prophecy in living heartbeats. Beyond the Godswood wall, bells tolled. First a single clear note from Maester Luwin's rookery, then the deeper booming of the castle's great bronze. Ned listened, heart pounding, as ravens lifted black wings into starlit snow. One part of him mourned the quiet life that could never return. Another glowed bright as new-hatched flame. Years would be spent contending with those twin truths. Civil wars threatened, southern crowns rattled, and in distant Essos, Dothraki warlords dreamed of golden princes grown to wingspan. Yet amidst it all, a realm bruised by frost and fire, now contained the one lineage tempered by both. Men might call it blasphemy or salvation. In time, songs would decide. For now, father, mother, children, and dragons breathed the crisp air of first winter. Snowflakes landed on newborn scales without melting, and Ned Stark felt destiny poised like a hunter's spear, no longer aimed from shadow, but carried openly, bright and lethal, in the hands of his own son. The wind that fanned Winterfell's towers carried a new note now, thin and high as the cry of a hunting hawk, yet unmistakably reptilian. Every morning, when the child dragons greeted the rising sun, their voices threaded through the cold air like bright needles, stitching dawn to stone. People paused in their chores to listen, half afraid, half exultant, for the sound promised both peril and promise. Valyria had planted roots in the Old North, and nothing in the world would ever grow quite the same again. Torrhen named the hatchlings Frostfire and Emberwing. Frostfire was the paler of the two, scales like moonlit ice with an undertone of sapphire. Emberwing shimmered a deep coppery red that darkened toward the tips of his fledgling pinions. They were scarcely the length of a man's arm, yet the maesters measured their growth daily and found the measurements wanting for ink. Each dawn added a finger's breadth to wingspan, each dusk another ounce of sleek muscle. Already the stable cats kept their distance, and once a kennel pup disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Daenora insisted on extra grooms and stout cages for the dragons at night, to discourage accidents. The third egg, the iron-dark shell shot through with crimson lightning, remained cold as the wall. Torrhen visited it nightly in the solar where Maester Luwin had built a bed of coals that never seemed to warm the stone. Sometimes the boy rested both hands upon it, closing his eyes. Ned would watch from the doorway, feeling the old castle draw still around them, as though it too waited for that egg's decision. If only the realm could have been put on similar pause. But ravens out of the south began to speak with forked tongues. Lord Renly wrote first, cheerful as spring, inviting Torrhen to tour the Stormlands and show the new dragons the rolling thunder of Shipbreaker Bay. A fortnight later, Stannis' hand delivered a sterner message. The faith of the Seven condemned unclean beastcraft and might move to ban dragon-keeping without crown sanction. Then Tyrion Lannister's clever scrawl arrived, offering a trove of Valyrian texts on husbandry, at a price that would mortgage half the Wolfswood for a generation. Amid diplomacy, the North itself simmered beneath familiar tensions. Some clans hailed the dragons as omen of Starks restored to ancient kingship. Others muttered that Winterfell had surrendered the old gods for southern sorcery. Farmers along the White Knife swore their cows had calved too early, spooked by nightly wing beats. Loggers in the Broken Branch claimed the trees whispered warnings in the rustle of frost-brittle leaves. Ned's answer was simple: work. He expanded the hold-fast schools, commissioned new granaries in every market town, ordered ring roads to speed carts even in deep snow. If dragons unnerved folk, bread would soothe them. If fear stalked the wild country, patrols would reassure. Yet each signature he set to parchment felt less like stewardship and more like kindling layered in advance of a blaze no one could yet see. Word reached Winterfell that King Robert meant to convene a grand council after the new year to deliberate on the matter of succession, and pointedly, the station of uncrowned princelings. Daenora read the message in the solar, her breath fogging the window pane, and murmured, "He would put Torrhen on display like some wonder beast." Ned could only nod. He heard the hammered iron of politics clanging behind the king's flowery phrases. Torrhen himself reacted with wary resolve. "I will go," he said over a supper of smoked hare. "If they fear dragons, let them hear the hatchlings before they imagine horrors." His voice had dropped lower these past moons, and he carried himself with an uncanny poise. Too old for his 12 years, thought Ned, yet unavoidably right. A realm ruled by rumor could only be calmed by honest witness. The journey south would not begin until the thaw, but preparations started at once. Blacksmiths hammered out cages of riveted iron lined with padded leather. Tailors cut cloak after cloak to fit a boy who might grow half a hand in height by the time he reached King's Landing. Ghost and Grey Wind were drilled to heel at martial commands. No wolfish charging at courtiers, Ned insisted, though the animal's wild spirits made the task daunting. Benjen selected a dozen seasoned rangers to accompany them, men who understood both northern silence and southern treachery. One crisp afternoon the training yard rang with practiced steel as Torrhen sparred an armsmaster from Skagos. Frostfire flitted overhead, shrieking encouragement, and Emberwing perched on the old bear pit stone lip, neck weaving like a rhythmic chant. They were expanding flight envelopes. Short bursts, then long swoops that scraped treetops. Maester Luwin timed their glides with a water clock, and reported that each day they spent more moments aloft. Watching, Arya Greyjoy, Asha's younger brother, left in hostage fosterage, remarked, "They'll outgrow cages before you reach White Harbor." Torrhen wiped sweat, smiling grimly. "Then I'll ride them, not cage them." The words were jest, but sparks danced in Emberwing's gaze as though it understood. Beside such hopeful labors, darker tasks unfolded. Melisandre, lingering at Castle Black, wrote of scarred weirwood faces turning north, as if listening to some distant trumpet of the dead. The Night's Watch discovered shattered bodies 10 leagues east of the Shadow Tower, corpses with blue-rimmed wounds that refused to rot. Stannis dispatched crates of blood-glass heads and a regiment of Lyseni cell-sails he deemed expendable, but eager. In a private letter, he urged Ned to hurry the southern embassy, for a realm unified under the Dragony Wolf standard may be the only levy against the Shadow Tide. Even as Ned considered the letter, fresh snow blanketed the courtyard, glittering under torchlight. The moon glowed swollen, and under that ghost lantern the third dragon egg cracked. No one saw the first fracture but Torrhen, who had fallen asleep with his back resting against the hot coal bed. He woke to a hairline glow, red-gold lines threading across the iron surface. Slowly the lines widened, revealing a dull ember pulse inside. The boy did not fetch anyone. He merely cupped his hands and sang. A wordless hum, pitched low, that seemed to come from his breastbone more than throat. Emberwing and Frostfire glided in through the open window and added their piping warbles, harmony weaving with the boy's strange note. Ned and Daenora came running only when the air itself changed. A sudden smell of scorched moss, the sense of pressure before a thunderclap. They burst into the solar as the shell fell away in 3 perfect segments, unveiling a dragon blacker than a starless pit, shot through the wings with sparks of violet. It was smaller than its siblings at hatching, thin and angular, eyes like shards of amethyst dusted in frost. The creature did not wail. It only regarded them each in turn, then folded its wings with unsettling grace. Torrhen exhaled, sweat beaded on his brow. Shadow Flame, he whispered, naming it, and in that moment, Ned accepted the fearful symmetry. 3 dragons for 3 heads, as every prophecy ever chanted in Valyrian catacombs had insisted. Whether that symmetry meant salvation or final ruin, none could know. Shadowflame refused cooked meat, preferring live prey. It hunted ravens on the wing, and once Ned witnessed it materialize from a cluster of dark leaves to snatch a field mouse before the creature even squeaked. Some nights it disappeared entirely, returning only at dawn with claws wet from who knew what kill. The maester swore its scale patterns shifted subtly in torchlight, as though shadows crept across its hide in ceaseless migration. When the southern road thawed to mud and rivulets, the embassy set out, Torrhen on a gray gelding named Snowfall, Daenora on a rangy black, Ned mounted on his old dapple, and behind them a caravan of wolf banners, free folk outriders and Night's Watch rangers in black leathers, trimmed with fresh-dyed blue. The dragons circled overhead each morning, then settled in wicker nests lashed atop wagons by midday. Only Shadowflame refused confinement. It darted from treetop to treetop, a creeping bruise against the sky. At White Harbor, they boarded 3 cog vessels refitted as floating mews. Lord Wyman met them on the docks, beaming through a salt spray haze. "I would fain see your dragons from nearer than a spyglass," he said, sweating despite the icy wind. Daenora obliged. Emberwing spread half-grown wings across the deck, and Frostfire dipped its head to nuzzle the old lord's double chins. Wyman's retainers gasped, but Wyman only laughed, unafraid. Shadowflame watched from the mast top, invisible until it blinked. Sailing south proved difficult. Gales battered the ships off the fingers. Shadowflame vanished for 2 days, reappearing with scales streaked by lightning soot and a single smoking fish clamped in its jaws. Sailors blessed and cursed by turns, tossing salt over shoulders and carving warding runes on railings. Torrhen spent hours on deck, braced against pitching boards, coaxing the dragons to ride wind shears. They learned quickly. Frostfire could already ride a gust as far as the next mast before flapping. By the time the cogs rounded Dragonstow's scorched crown, rumors had outtraced them. Fishing skiffs clustered to gape at the sky. Cries of "Dragon Prince" echoed across the waves. Stannis' garrison lined the black sand beach in drill-straight ranks, and Melisandre stood alone atop the stone causeway, hair whipping like living flame. She bowed low to Torrhen, an act that shocked Ned more than any vision the Red Woman had yet claimed. "The stones sing of you," she said, voice carrying across surf. "And the fires show 3 shadows, 1 of dawn, 2 of dusk. Choose which rules your hand and which your heart." Da. The night spent on Dragonstone churned Ned's guts. In the halls where Aegon once dreamed conquest, torchlight painted every wall with the silhouette of wings. Daenora walked corridors she had known as a child. Sometimes she paused and touched a column, as if listening to memories trapped in basalt. Stannis guided Ned to a balcony overlooking a courtyard of fused glass. "The king will press you," he warned. "Robert fears what he cannot drink or fight. He will test the boy, then cage him if he can." Ned gripped the cold rail. "Torrhen is no weapon to swap between thrones." Stannis' gaze flickered toward the flickering lights where the dragons roosted atop an outbuilding. "Everything is a weapon." Stark. The wall taught me that when you fought one monster with another. Before dawn they sailed again, a short hop across Blackwater Bay to King's Landing. Summer hail pelted the sails. The air smelled of sewage and spice. As their prows nosed past muddy banks, bells clanged all across the city, iron throats shouting the arrival of marvels not seen in centuries. From the deck Torrin stared at the Red Keep's turrets. Emberwing rumbled on his shoulder, sensing tension. Frostfire glided ahead, talons skimming the river. Shadowflame was a smear above, blending against storm clouds. Landing at the Mudgate proved chaos. Goldcloak struggled to hold back crowds. Small folk waved crude banners showing wolves breathing fire. Some reached to touch Torrin's horse, tugging at his stirrup until ghosts snarled and watchers fell back. Daenora rode tall, yet Ned saw her hand tighten on the reins like a woman grasping a serpent behind her spine. Within the Red Keep, courtiers lined the long gallery, their silks a gaudy picked bouquet. Robert waited on the iron throne, crown askew, doublet stretched at belly. Cersei sat at his right, face carved of marble, and beside the king stood a white-cloaked Jaime, expression unreadable. Varys drifted like a plush shadow. Petyr Baelish smirked near the columns, and Grand Maester Pycelle leaned heavily on his chain, eyes watery with speculation. The Faith's High Septon, newly elected, hovered in gold thread robes that nearly matched Cersei's hair. Torrin advanced alone while Ned and Daenora remained 10 paces back. The boy knelt, but briefly. When he rose, Frostfire and Emberwing swooped from the rafters. Unbidden. Gasps erupted. Frostfire alighted on the boy's shoulder. Emberwing circled twice, wings stirring embroidered banners, before landing at his feet. Shadowflame remained unseen. Robert's ruddy face flushed deeper. Fear, anger, or awe Ned could not tell. "Well," the king said, voice booming. "The Dragon Prince arrives in style." His eyes flicked to Jaime. "Sir," he commanded, "test the lad." Jaime stepped forward, drawing a practiced sword handed by a squire. A friendly bout, your grace," he asked, but his grin told another story. Torrin laid a hand on the hilt of his own training steel, not the blood glass. The hall cleared, courtiers retreating under statues of ancient kings. They circled. Torrin held a balanced guard, blade steady. Jaime feinted left, then spun, testing reflex. The boy parried neatly, sliding aside. Again and again. Steel kissed. Jaime's strokes grew sharper. Torrin adapted, shifting feet with wolfish grace learned from rangers on icy courtyards. Frostfire hissed at each clash. The hall echoed. Then Jaime disengaged, saluted, and turned half to Robert. "Stout lad. Let him keep his dragon so long as he minds the king." It sounded generous yet carried an edge, implying Torrin posed no threat Jaime could not blunt. But Cersei rose. "A test of arms proves little. What of piety?" She gestured to the High Septon, who waddled forward. "Let the boy swear his beasts to the Seven, to ensure they serve righteous purpose." A hush. Torrin frowned. Lightning flickered beyond the stained glass windows. "I was raised in the old god's shade," he said, voice carrying. "Yet I hold no hatred for yours. My dragons bend to justice, not to idols." Emberwing's ridged spine rattled softly, perhaps agreement. The High Septon twitched. "Blasphemy," he whispered. "Monsters heed no justice." And as if summoned by the word, Shadowflame descended from the gloom. It landed on the Septon's ornate mitre, claws clicking once before it sprang lightly to Torrin's upheld arm. The Septon shrieked, robes tangling, almost toppling. Laughter burst, Robert's loudest of all, though it cracked with nerves. Petyr Baelish knelt to retrieve the Septon's fallen staff, offering it back with a sly smile. "Seems the dragons choose their own altars," he murmured, too low for all but Ned and Varys to hear. The court had witnessed a spectacle, but Robert waved it aside. "Enough. The council meets tomorrow. For tonight, let us drink." Yet when they retired to their assigned chambers, Ned discovered quadrupled guards outside each door. Ostensibly for protection, but likely as jailers should storms of politics turn. The council chamber smelled of parchment and dusted wine. Maps lay unfurled across the table, red wax markers pegging places of descent. Dorne stirring under young Prince Quentyn, the reach whispering of high garden roses grown too sharp. The Iron Islands restless with new priest-kings promising drowned gods' tides. Robert wrapped his fist around a carafe and declared, "We cannot quarrel over thrones when shadows walk in the cold." He eyed Ned. "Tell them what you saw." Ned spoke plainly of the frostborn king, the wall's battle, the dragon's awakening. The lords listened. Now, shifting uneasily. When he finished, Tyrion adjusted his collar and said, "Marvelous tale. Yet if the wall holds, and the boy commands Sunfire, why drag the rest of the realm into northern snows? Tywin Lannister proposes a fortress of gold. Let the crown send coin, not sons." "And so?" Daenora answered before Ned could. "Because gold does not burn in dragonflame, my lord. It melts. White Walkers melt it too, beneath the black of their frost." Her tone was calm but glacial. Stannis, seated beside Renly, grunted. "Coin buys Sellswords. Sellswords flee at first winter gale. We need unity." Renly rolled his eyes, but nodded grudgingly. Robert slammed the carafe down. Red wine spattered Maps like fresh blood. "Unity means heirs," he thundered. "My seed has not quickened in Cersei for 3 years. So I named Torhen. Stark my ward in future hand, to learn the realm's needs." Gasps. "Ditto." Cersei's face blanched, then purpled. Jaime's hand slid toward his sword hilt. Varys coughed delicately. Ned's pulse hammered. "Your Grace, Torren must remain near the wall." Robert cut him off with raised palm. "The wall stands. Let the boy learn courts." He stared Ned down. "I swore no harm. He will have title, coin, a stable for his pets. And your own room beside his." Somewhere outside, thunder cracked. Shadow flame chirred from its perch on Torhen's chair back. Frostfire lifted translucent wings, and Emberwing's tail thumped the rushes. The dragon's presence gave the chamber an unreal hush. Cersei spoke then, voice like silk over broken glass. "We cannot house dragons in the city. Their appetites." Her glance slid to Maester Pycelle, who nodded sagely. But Robert set both palms on the table and leaned forward. "Aegon's 3 beasts built the realm, and the realm survived. The boys are half-grown. They will stay." He looked at Ned again, softer. "I need you, old friend. The realm needs you. I am drowning in boars and banquets, while knives flash behind curtains." "Nemdrol." Ned met Daenora's eyes. She inclined her head, decision shared. He spoke. "We will remain until spring wanes. Then Torren returns north for training, dragons in tow. After each harvest, he may winter here, but the snows will claim him always." Robert hesitated, then accepted with clasped forearms. "Done." Cersei swept from the room, emerald skirts swirling. Jaime followed, not before casting Ned a look both rueful and warning. Tyrion sipped wine and murmured, "Half a loaf each? Let us hope the bakers survive the fire." In the weeks that followed, King's Landing learned to live with dragons. Fishwives sold extra offal for Emberwing's breakfast. Smiths forged chain leashes of black iron. Urchins chased Frostfire's pale shadow along the rooftops. Shadow flame seldom showed itself, yet thieves caught scrabbling at Spicetown windows reported 2 violet eyes appearing mid-air before them, and fled shrieking of whispering darkness. Torren studied with the city's weapon masters at dawn, learned ledgers from Baelish at noon, and listened to very soft lessons on the fragile hearts of common folk after the candles were snuffed. Ned oversaw the rebuilding of the city watch into mixed companies of Northmen, Stormlanders, and Tyrell men, anything to dilute Lannister goldcloaks. Daenora met with the High Septon weekly, each debate on theology more courteous than the last. Gradually he came to bless her dragons as other of God's marvels, though Ned doubted the faith militant were convinced. Still, tension coiled. One night, an assassin scaled the Tower of the Hand, blade smeared with pale grease for silence. Ghost intercepted him mid-window. The man tumbled, tore free, only to collide with Shadowflame, materializing from gloom. The dragon's breath was not flame but a vapor so cold it burned. The killer fell screaming as flesh froze gray. Ned doubled the watch again, but the message was delivered. Cersei struck subtler blows. Feast nights featured songs of Maegor the Cruel's tyranny, of dragons scorching fields. Bards sang of Winterfell wolves, turning south to devour neighbor lands. Yet her greatest weapon was rumor about Torrhen's parentage, whispering that he was Rhaegar's whelp spirited away, not Ned's. Maester Pycelle spread observations on violet flecks in the boy's eyes. The city hummed. Ned countered by presenting Lord Rickard Karstark and Lady Maegor Mormont, each attesting to Torrhen's birth at Winterfell. But whispers seldom die once loosed. On the 15th day of Moon of Songs, an explosion rocked the Street of Steel. Wildfire barrels hidden in a smithy. Flames kissed the fleet of wagons carrying blood-glass shipments south. Fire danced caloric green. Emberwing darted into the cloud and devoured it, gulping the unnatural flame like sweetmeat. When the last spark winked out, the dragon's scales gleamed radioactive emerald before settling back to copper. People fled or knelt. It was hard to say which instinct ruled. Later that night, Robert confronted Cersei, half-dragged into her solar by his own guards. Ned arrived to find the queen bruised at wrist, but defiant. "I will not see my children burned beneath some northern monster's ambition," she spat. Robert shook with fury and impotence. "Your monsters have your eyes," he shouted. "Mine is honor-bound." The next morning, ravens carried news of Tywin mustering at Casterly Rock. 2,000 knights rode for Harrenhal, winter tourney banners fluttering, the pretext thin as a cat's whisker. Renly whispered Tyrell levies drilled in secret glades, Dornish patrols massed at Prince's Pass. All waited to see if the king would cage the dragons or unleash war. Ned summoned Torrhen to the Godswood within the Red Keep. A twist of oaks transplanted from stood his own heart tree. Beneath white-painted bark flakes, Ned asked, "Do the dragons obey you utterly?" Torrhen considered. "They heed me," he said slowly. "But Shadowflame listens to something else too. Something old." He met Ned's gaze. "If men force our hand, we may win battles. But peace." He shook his head. "Then we must forge peace sharper than swords." Ned knelt, placing a hand on the damp moss. "I will speak with Varys, perhaps reach Tywin through Kevin. Daenora will meet the High Garden envoys." He looked up. "And you, my son, will fly." Torrhen blinked. "Fly." There is a language of awe no court can silence. "You and Frostfire will soar above the tourney grounds at Harrenhal. Let them see the dragon bends to a child's voice, not to wrath. Then descend and swear before the Seven and the old gods alike. The dragons are sworn to guard the realm, never to rule it." The boy swallowed. "And Shadowflame. Shadowflame guards you unseen, but keep it distant that day." Ned's voice dropped. Some things must remain mystery. That night, with moonlight pooling silver on parapets, Torrhen climbed atop Frostfire for the first time. The dragon was small for a rider, but Torrhen was slight still. He secured a braided leather harness around the narrow breastbone and looped his legs under ridged belly scales. Daenora stood near, torch held high, while Emberwing watched, jealousy flaring amber. Shadowflame crouched in the dark, invisible. With a grating cough, Frostfire unfurled 2 sails of milky wing and launched. Down Raedrot blasted hair and flame alike. Torrhen whooped, childish, exultant, and Frostfire carried him above the battlements, over the city where torches prickled like fireflies. Below, people screamed in terror or wonder. Within heartbeats, cheers followed. The boy and his dragon wheeled thrice, then glided toward the bay, skimming ship masts before spiraling back. They landed amid swirling dust. Torrhen slid off, knees shaking but eyes blazing. Ned clasped his shoulders. Harrenhal will remember. The tourney thrummed like a hive under thunderclouds. Knights glinted in sunlight, banners rippled, merchants hawked spiced wine. Yet tension coiled in every smile. Tywin watched from the Widow's Tower, golden armor catching each flicker of sun. Mace Tyrell paraded floral crests. Oberyn Martell lounged cat-like, daggers winking. Even Balon Greyjoy sent his daughter Asha as observer, her eyes measuring walls as though already plotting how to breach. On the second afternoon, horns blared but jousting ceased. Clouds gathered unnatural greenish cast. Spectators craned. They had heard rumor. A distant roar echoed, faint but rising. Then Frostfire burst through cloud cover, white wings blazing in sunlight. Torrhen rode, posture upright, hair streaming. Night helms tilted, ladies shrieked delight. Frostfire banked low over the lake, vaporizing mist in its heat. Ripples shivered outward as fish leapt, half-cooked where shadow passed. At the tilt yard, Frostfire hovered. Torrhen raised his hand. Silence fell as if a lid clamped shut on the world. The boy's voice rang out across the throng. I, Torrhen of House Stark, son of Eddard and Daenora, swear on wing and fang that no dragon I birth or ride shall raise fire against the innocent, nor seek crown over these lands. They live to shield the realm of men, as we guarded the wall. By the old gods and the Seven, and by the memories of Skara and the frostborn king, I so vow. Now. He pressed his palm against Frostfire's neck. The dragon emitted a low rumble, like molten snow sliding, and angled upright, unleashing a column of flame skyward. It burned red gold, then azure, before twisting into a spiral and snuffing itself clean. Gasps. Then applause thundered. Even Tywin stood. Slow clap, measured. Yet out on the practice grounds beyond the lists, a cry rose, not of awe but alarm. Shadowflame had appeared, circling low where goldcoats corralled prisoners of petty theft. The dragon's eyes locked on one man, a gaunt figure shackled, with a face Ned would later learn belonged to a poacher from the Crownlands. Shadowflame dove, claws raking iron bars, severing them like straw. Then it perched upon the man's shoulder and hissed at the guards, daring them. Panic spread. Horses reared. Tyrell archers drew. Torrhen spurred Frostfire toward the riot, Ned's shout swallowed by the roar of wings. In the chaos no one noticed another group. A dozen crossbowmen in Lannister crimson, bows already cocked. Their quarrels glimmered green, tips coated in wildfire jelly. A scream of loose, cut through din. But Ghost and Grey Wind were faster. They slammed into the shooters, jaws crunching bone. Quarrels flew wide. One grazed Frostfire's flank, bursting in a spurt of viridian flame. The dragon shrieked, but banked hard. Torrhen clung, calves bleeding from shredded harness. Shadowflame whirled above, violet eyes blazing. It released a pulse of freezing vapor, the unnatural chill that had slain the assassin weeks before. The vapor struck the wildfire flame, snuffing it. Quarrels sizzled into harmless smoke. The Lannister men lay dead or broken beneath direwolf fury. Knights closed around, but Tywin never moved, only stared at the carnage, jaw tight as a vice. Frostfire landed, limping. Torrhen dismounted, steadied by Daenora, who had fought through crowds with Dawnfire drawn. Ned reached them in time to hear the boy whisper, "It chose mercy." He meant Shadowflame, which now hovered like a dark moon above the freed poacher, who knelt weeping. The tourney wept chaos. Renly demanded arrests. Oberyn scoffed. Suggesting Cersei's green arrows might explain wildfire tips. Mace Tyrell fretted about scorched jonquils. But Robert rose from his dais, the only sound his boots on stone. People parted like wheat before scythe. He strode to Torrhen, seized the boy's forearms. Blood-smeared king's fingers. "You saved them again," he muttered, loud enough for all. "Your dragons saved them." Then, raising his voice, "These beasts are sworn to the realm, and by my word, any hand raised against them, or their rider shall be struck off at the wrist." Cheers mingled with boos, but the king's command cut through. Tywin bowed. Shallow, but enough. The Tyrells applauded with studied enthusiasm. Only Cersei slipped away, face livid. That night, as Harrenhal's towers groaned in wind, Ned met Kevan Lannister beneath a cracked gargoyle. Kevin spoke without greeting. My brother did not order those quarrels. Our cousin Sir Harris did, thinking to earn father's favor. He swallowed. Tywin is furious. Harris will spend what life remains in the rock's darkest pit. Ned studied the man's earnest eyes. Fury does not erase arrows loosed. No, Kevin agreed. But perhaps it stays the next volley. He hesitated, then produced a scroll. A treaty. Drafted by Maester Pycelle at father's bidding. Lannister gold to fund the watch. Lannister troops to man new keeps. In exchange for trade rights in the shivering sea markets. Reopened by free folk settlements. He sighed. And a marriage proposal. My niece Myrcella to your daughter Lyanna, when both come of age. A gesture of peace, wolf and lion. His voice cracked on the last. Ned accepted the scroll. Somewhere inside hope stirred, tempered, weary, but alive. I will consider. Kevin nodded, turned back into shadows. Months later, as snowmelt flooded riverbanks, and the first buds of spring winked pink on Winterfell's ancient apple trees, ravens arrived bearing sigils not seen in a century. A crowned dragon clutching a direwolf. Robert had stamped Torrhen's new seal across decrees, ratifying the Northern Lannister Accord, the Reach Grain Pipeline, and Dornish Passage for watch reinforcements. He named Torrhen Shield of the Realm, and appointed Ned co-regent for all matters north of the Neck. The scrolls trembled in Maester Luwin's hands as he read. Torrhen stood on the battlements, gazing north where clouds piled like frozen mountains. Frostfire and Emberwing soared playful spirals. Shadowflame drifted higher, a living eclipse partly lit by dawn. Ned joined him, cloak snapping. The realm edges toward peace, Ned said, almost disbelief coloring the words. Torrhen did not turn. Peace is a moment. He pointed skyward. The shadow up there moves still. The dead yet whisper. He laid a palm on Ned's. But moments matter. They pile into years. If we can chain enough together. Ned squeezed his son's hand. Then dragons and wolves together will show them how. Beneath in the courtyard, children chased pupa-sized Emberwing until the dragon launched laughing sparks. Blue flame melted a patch of ice, revealing black, damp earth Rick, ready to grow. Asha Greyjoy practiced spearwork with Rickon Stark. Daenora oversaw masons fitting the first black stone from Dragonstone into Winterfell's wall, a symbol of fused houses. And in the Godswood, the heart tree's face smiled, red sap tears bright in rising sunlight, as if pleased by the tale it now watched unfold. One of ash and snow, of vows kept through fire and cold, and of the fragile yet enduring dream Ned Stark had carried all his life. That honor, once bent around the right alloy, could become unbreakable. High above, 3 dragons rode the same current, white and red and shadow dark, banking toward horizons neither men nor prophecies had yet charted. Spring unfurled across the north like a cautious lover, easing the iron bite of winter from Winterfell's ramparts, coaxing strands of emerald moss from cracks in the ancient masonry, and tempering the chill in the air with a shy pear-blossom warmth. With it came an unfamiliar quiet. Ravens still traced black hieroglyphs against the sky, but they carried fewer urgent messages of mustered armies or restless noble houses. The forge fires still burned, yet the clang of hammers rang more often on plowshares than on swords. Even the sound of dragons overhead, so new, so impossible only months before, had begun to weave itself into the daily rhythms of the castle, as natural as the call of geese returning to the glass garden's ponds. Ned Stark woke before dawn each morning, as he always had, but now he paused on the way to break his fast to listen for those wing beats. They came at unpredictable intervals, a sudden whump of air as frostfire swept low across the Godswood, a lighter rustle when Emberwing shot down to snatch an unwary hare from the grass, or sometimes a hush that was not silence at all, but the absence of sound that foretold Shadowflame gliding invisibly somewhere just out of sight. Ned would close his eyes and picture each beast aloft in its invisible dance, then open them again to the very mortal duties of lordship that could not pause for wonder. Those duties of late centered on shepherding a fragile, many-headed peace. The treaty with the Lannisters had not been welcomed by every northern banner, and several lesser lords still grumbled that House Stark had traded ancestral loyalties for southern gold. Yet the influx of that gold used to finish granaries, dredge moats, and line every keep's armory with blood-glass-tipped arrows, was harder to argue with when stores brimmed and children's bellies stayed full through the lean weeks before new harvest. Ned held open courts twice each 7 day, letting small folk bring petitions of flooded cellars or livestock strayed too near dragonfire. He decided each with the same measured fairness that had guided him since boyhood. Still, he knew fairness alone would not hold the realm. Something deeper must root, or else all would erode when the next hard wind blew. Daenora took that task upon herself. She organized rotating markets where free folk, northern smallholders, and even merchants up from the Reach could barter without tolls for a day at a time, each under the joint sigils of wolf and dragon. She oversaw the first weaving hall in Deepwood Motte, dedicated to making northern wool into scarlet and black cloth for export. "So no southerner forgets which banners wrap them warm," she said with a smile. In quiet moments she sat with Maester Luwin and charted every reported movement of the undead beyond the wall, each odd tale of woods gone silent, or hunters returning half-mad with stories of glowing blue eyes. Her quill sketched patterns no ordinary map revealed, threads of rumor that, when pulled together, began to form the outline of something vast stirring in the frozen waste. Torrhen moved everywhere at once, a pale shadow lengthening with every day's growth. He sparred at dawn with Benjen and the household guard, then climbed the rookery's spiral staircase to debate arithmetic with Luwin, then spent afternoons on Frostfire's back, mapping air currents over lake and hill so precisely that the maester started noting his observations beside the weather runes. Sometimes Ned caught him perched on the highest turret with papers spread, scribbling designs for saddles that could shift as the dragons grew, or harness rigs that might let a rider hang beneath a dragon's belly for stealth flights. The boy's notebooks carried marginalia in 3 languages already, and Ned suspected a 4th encoded script he had not cracked. It was Emberwing who first outpaced the castle walls. One clear morning, the copper-scaled dragon shrieked once, leapt from the battlements, and rode a thermal so high that its form became a glittering moat against the sun. When it returned hours later, its talons gripped 6 silver trout, still wriggling from the weeping water. The feat delighted the kitchens. Dragon-caught fish turned to a delicacy Ned could scarcely remember from childhood feasts, and confirmed what Daenora had intuited. Soon the dragons would range leagues from their roost. They needed eyes and allies they could trust beyond Winterfell. So began the tours. Torrhen, accompanied by old Nan's great-grandson Hullen Esquire, and Lyanna's wet nurse and a dozen wolfsguard, rode circuit through the baronies of the north, Emberwing and Frostfire flanking overhead like twin banners of living flame. At each holdfast, Torrhen accepted fealty not with pomp, but with axe. He helped rebuild a collapsed mill wheel, lent Frostfire's fire to a poor smithy so the man could forge tools too heavy for his small hearth, spent a night reading star positions with a Hexen senior of House Slate, who had never been invited to Winterfell in her 95 years. The people began to call him Young Brandon Returned, invoking the builder who once bridged cultures of wood, ice, and fire. Torrhen answered every such praise with a single refrain. "Remember, peace is not a gift but a craft. We must practice it." The phrase spread. In taverns from Last Hearth to Fair Isle, vagrants with holes in their shoes started greeting each other with a muttered craft the peace. Half joke, half pledge. Yet if peace was craft, war was instinct. News seeped through the cracks of calm like night mist. In the Westerlands, Sir Harry's mutilation at Casterly Rock had not stilled whispers of vengeance. Cousins of lesser lineages talked of redeeming Lyon's honor with deeds that shimmered somewhere between duel and assassination. In King's Landing, Cersei's faction coiled tighter, leaning on the faith to demand inquests. If dragons were sworn to the realm, why did they roost in Winterfell, beyond the crown's daily gaze? The High Septon temporized. Dragons frightened him even in prayer. So Cersei nurtured a lesser sect, the Pure Light, whose devotees carried braziers of scented oil and sang at dawn about cleansing flames superior to hellspawn. They paraded lanterns shaped like 7-pointed stars, each tip sharpened so the lantern itself could become a cudgel in a riot. When Ned's spies reported the sect's growth, he read the parchment by candlelight and felt the old familiar dread that men would always find new banners under which to march old hatreds. Farther south, another tide rose. Across the narrow sea, the wars of Qohor spilled west. Dothraki Khalasars scarred Taroshi vineyards. Refugees poured into Pentos, telling of new wizards calling themselves the Saffron Oath who brewed plagues in broken temples. One rumor claimed a girl of 14 with silver gold hair had walked out of the red waste untouched by sun or thirst, promising to hatch 1,000 dragons from the earth itself. Ned set the scroll aside and wondered what miracle might be born of all the ash left by Eris's reign. Miracles were rarely kind to those who witnessed them up close. And always, always, the white beyond the wall whispered. Vengeance ravens came thin and nervous. Patrols vanished. The Nightfort's weeping well brimmed with fresh water, though no melt fed it. A great shape was glimpsed one dawn striding along the Frostfang peaks, too large for any mortal giant, its crown a lattice of ice. The Black Brothers did what they could, burned the woods they could not guard, erected pyres at each bridge to serve as beacons, swapped steel-shod axes for blood-glass ones. But they were fewer than their watchposts, stretched like too thin mortar in a wall of loose stones. Ned sat with Daenora in the solar one such night, listening to spring rain tick across the panes, and spoke the fear aloud. All our treaties, all these markets and marriages, they will crumble if the walkers march again. We still do not know what they sought that night. The frostborn king fell. Their purpose may be greater than war. Daenora, combing Lyanna's curls by the hearth, met his gaze. We know at least one purpose. They sought Torhen, or what rides within him. She paused, setting the comb aside. Shadowflame chooses its own paths. If the dead command cold, and Shadowflame commands cold's twin, there is a line of balance the others despise. To tilt it, they must either slay him, or turn him. Then Ned's blood chilled more than any northern gale. He cannot always remain behind stone. Soon he will ride farther than we can guard. Then we must craft the peace inside him, as he asks others to craft it outside. Daenora rose, her silver hair slipping forward like a veil. Will you walk with me? They went to the old crypts, torches flicking. Ned had avoided this place of late, uneasy with the knowledge that new names might join the dead sooner than he could carve them. Yet Daenora guided him deeper, past his ancestors' effigies, to the sealed alcove where Brandon and Rickard had no faces, only rough blocks awaiting chisel that grief had never finished. Before those blank stones lay the iron chest that contained Skara's ashes and a few fused scales, retrieved from the wall's ruin. Torren had laid them here the day after the battle, pouring a cup of pine resin to seal the lock. Daenora knelt and touched the box. Dragons remember, she said softly. Skara's fire is part of the blade, but her ash is here, beneath Winterfell's heart. So long as Torhen visits, he will remember that fire serves life, not glory. She looked up, eyes shining. Our son's power is not a torch we hand to kings. It is a hearth we must teach him to tend. Ned knelt beside her. A slow peace seeped through him. Yes, peace, though forged of sorrow. He pressed his palm to the cold iron lid, and pictured Torren's earnest face, the way he spoke to farmers as equals, how he laughed when Frostfire tried to mimic a dire wolf's howl. Such a boy might wield dragons better than any conqueror before him, not because he sought dominion but because he cherished fragility. Ned whispered a vow then, quiet, for only the dead and Daenora to hear, that he would guard that fragility with every stratagem honor allowed. Word of the Harrenhal vow reverberated in places Ned had never walked. In Lannisport docks, sailors debated whether a dragon that promised mercy could be trained to haul cargo. In Sunspear, Princess Arianne wrote poetry likening Torren to the griffin of myth. Half lion, half eagle, guardian of treasure. In Old Town, archmaesters argued about clandestine scrolls describing a shadow dracon revered by Valyria's necromancers. texts long dismissed as fable until Shadowflame's appearance matched their inked illustrations. But the most unsettling reply came not by raven but by whisper, carried by a sellsword fleeing the stepstones. He told a tale of meeting an exiled warlock, who claimed the doom of Qarth would be reborn in Westeros, under 3 wings: Frost, Ember, and Void. The sellsword sold the story for 2 coppers and a night's lodging. But the spy who heard it sent it straight on to Varys, and Varys murmured it into Ned's ear the next time they met in King's Landing's shadowed halls. "A prophecy, my lord," the eunuch said, twinning his fingers as if plucking harp strings. "Prophecies are like leeches. They drink whomever believes them. Best burn them before they grow fat." "Then tell." Ned's reply was blunt. "I will burn any prophecy that threatens my son, but first I will know its every word." Varys admired that answer. He promised to trace the rumor to its source. Whether he could or would remained uncertain. In the Red Keep, Cersei plotted. She invited the pure light to preach on the steps of Baelor's Sept, praising the faith of the 7 while condemning beasts of unnatural birth. She sent jewels to the Dornish ambassadors' mistresses, with notes hinting that dragons could scorch Dorne before it burned. She coaxed Qyburn, once maester of dubious repute, to examine wildfire recipes for substances that might freeze as well as burn. Jaime cautioned her. One misstep, he said, and Robert's renewed trust in the Starks would snap back on her like a bear trap. But Cersei only smiled, tapping a finger on her belly. If Baratheon's seed would not quicken, perhaps alliances unborn might. She dispatched silent couriers toward Braavos, where sell sails owed Lannister gold. No word came, but she counted on silence, the kind that signaled assassins on dark wings. Robert, for his part, wrestled between boredom and fear. He missed battle, loathed counsel, and yet sensed the old game had new stakes: dragons and dead things, prophecies and living symbols. He drank less, trained more, swinging his warhammer at straw dummies set on the tourney field until his arms shook. Sometimes he asked Ned to spar, and they did, wooden swords clacking under dusk's last stripes, until Robert staggered, laughing and gasping. "Still beats politics," he would wheeze. But after each bout, Ned saw the hollowness in his friend's eyes. A man who had climbed one mountain, only to discover a higher peak awaited, and his legs had grown old. Summer's threshold arrived in a rush of hot wind. Grain tasseled early, rivers receded. The scent of wild heather drifted farther south than any trading captains remembered. Torrhen's 15th name day drew near, and with it, talk of knighthood. Robert, eager for ceremony, wrote that a dragon-riding squire should be knighted before all the realm, perhaps at Storm's End or on the Field of the Reeds. Stannis argued Torrhen should swear vows shaped for the wall's defense, not tourney fields. Daenora quietly proposed a different rite entirely: a forging of blade to blade between Torrhen and a champion chosen by both Godswood and Sept, symbol of the twin faiths grown under his wings. Ned weighed the choices. In the end, he chose Winterfell's heart tree. Let Torrhen's oath rise from the same roots that had drunk Stark blood since the Dawn Age. Let the dragons witness from branches overhead. Robert agreed, though with disappointment. He had pictured feasting under lanterns, and sent casks of the arbor's finest as apology for his absence. Stannis arrived instead, Melisandre in tow, along with Davos and a pair of archmaesters keen to study dragon growth. Tywin sent Sir Kevan and Tyrion, along with a chest of gold filigree armor sized to Torrhen's slender frame. Dorne's gift was subtler. Prince Doran's son, Quentyn, rode north bearing a scroll of water rights treaties for the Dane fiefdoms. Negotiations long stalled, and from the Vale came a shipload of marble blocks. Jon Arryn insisted be used to rebuild the eastern watchtower as a lighthouse for the dragon's return. The name day dawned under skies of unbroken blue. Frostfire, now the size of a small warhorse, perched on the highest tower with wings half unfurled, catching thermals. Emberwing flickered like a live torch among the treetops, chasing squirrels. Shadowflame draped itself across the rafters of the great hall, until its scales blended with the timber shadows, eyes half-lidded but watchful. The courtyard filled with banners and onlookers. Torrhen strode forward in black mail edged with silver knots. No plate yet, He disdained the gold-set Tywin sent, though he thanked Sir Kevin with courtesy. Dawnfire hung at Daenor's hip, ice at Ned's. Torrhen carried the sword born of Skara's flame, its runes burning low as banked coals. The champion chosen by Sipti and Hearttree alike was an unexpected one. Mage Mormont, dressed in grisly hide over chain, her graying hair a storm about her shoulders. She had instructed Torrhen since his first daggers with steel. Now she faced him, unsmiling, with a practice axe blunted but still lethal. The duel unfolded in 3 measured exchanges, first with wooden shields, then bare steel slowed, and finally with the flame-glass sword alone against Mage half. Torrhen fought as he had learned, flowing rather than battering, turning power aside, instead of meeting it head-on, yet striking when openings flared. The crowd saw not a boy gifted with beasts, but a young man who earned each breath of mastery. On the last exchange, Mage feinted a low sweep. Torrhen leapt, half-twisted, and tapped her shoulder with the flat of his blade. She froze, then barked laughter so loud ravens took wing from half-finished towers. "Done," she declared, voice echoing. She knelt. Mage Mormont knelt, and said, "My lord, ride your dragons well. Lady Bear will guard your forest." Torrhen, stunned, helped her up, then knelt himself before Ned. Ghost and Greywind padded forward, sitting like stone sentinels. Frostfire glided down, folding wings. Emberwing landed on Torrhen's gauntlet. Chirping, shadow flames slithered along the roofline, resemblance to living smoke. Ned lifted ice, flat resting first on Torrhen's right shoulder, then left. "In the name of the old gods and the new," he intoned, "I dub thee Sir Torrhen Stark, Shield of the Realm, Warden of Skyfire. Stand, Knight of House Wolf and Wing." The sword rang in hot summer air. As Torrhen rose, a hush hung. Then Frostfire roared, a full, deep-throated blast that rolled across the bailey. Emberwing echoed, higher. Shadowflame loosed a hiss that rippled with frost. The 3 cries braided into one chord that shook banners and rattled men's hearts loose of old grudges for a fleeting, perfect moment. Cheers erupted, barrels of ale cracked. Musicians struck up reels from Bear Island and Les and the Summer Isles all at once. Even Stannis smiled, though only with his eyes. The feast lasted until the moon was high. Tyrion traded riddles with Melisandre. Davos won a wrestling match against 3 free folk. To their howling amusement, Daenora danced with Quentyn Martell beneath lanterns shaped like fiery blossoms. Ned sat long beneath the heart tree, after the din faded, ice across his knees, thinking he heard the faintest tinkle of sap, as if the old face were laughing. But if trees could laugh, they could also warn. In the darkest hour, Ned felt eyes on him. No living eyes. He stood and saw, at the courtyard's edge, a figure in black mail washed blue by moonlight. It was Sir Waymar Wren, one of Benjen's rangers reported missing months ago. Or what had worn his form? Frost glazed his beard, eyes glowed a deadly cerulean. The spectre raised a sword of queer crystal. Ice leapt to meet it. Their blades struck, spitting sparks of darkness and starlight. Ned's cry carried across the keep. Men poured from halls. Dragons shrieked. Torrhen sprinted first, blood-glass sword drawn. Emberwing and Frostfire swooped. Shadow flame melted from darkness like ink. The walker fought silently, each stroke cold enough to numb bone through plate. Ned staggered as ice crept along Ice's Valyrian ridges. Frost leapt arm's length. Torrhen shouted something wordless and crashed into the duel. Fire licked along his blade. With a downward slice he severed the crystal weapon. The walker recoiled, snarling. A noise that scraped iron. But there was no time. From the woods beyond the outer wall came more shapes, quiet as drifting snowflakes. 2, 5, a dozen. Some so tall they ducked under branch, others sleek, their armor fused to skin. Each bore a weapon of transparent death. A white wolf bounded in their wake, and behind it, an echo of horns, 3 low notes, rolled on the wind. Benjen's signal from miles off. The wall must be breached. Chaos bloomed. Archers loosed blood-glass arrows that burst adversaries into glimmering shards. Others struck only whites that kept staggering. Frostfire's breath fanned a swath of blue-white flame hotter than any forge. Emberwing followed, torching undead ranks. But for every slain walker, two advanced. They came for Torren, their eyes fixed. Shadowflame descended, exhaling freezing fog that halted some. But one walker surged through, blade poised. Time fractured. Ned felt his body move slower than thought. But another form flashed. Daenora. The princess, the queen, the mother, interposed Dawnfire in both hands. Her parry rang crystalline. She pivoted, thrust, severed an arm at elbow. The limb shattered. Yet the walker's swipe tore mail, left a crimson bloom across her ribs. She faltered. Torren roared Skara's name. His sword blazed with such intensity that the runes seemed molten. He drove straight through the walker's chest. There was a sound like glass imploding inward. Ice mist whirled outward, scalding cold. When it cleared, nothing remained but drifting motes. Still more came. Benjen burst through the gate, astride a smoking black horse, face ash pale. They breach at the gorge and spill south, he shouted. A host. Stark. Not like before. Thousands. The words stole breath from every lung. Ned helped Daenora steady. Her wound bled, but she waved him on. Go, she said. I will not fall to cold steel. Melisandre appeared, pressing hot hands to the wound. Steam hissed. Dawnfire glimmered brighter, as if feeding on pain. Ned turned to see Torren mounting Frostfire. Emberwing flapped into formation. Shadowflame coiled around them both, a dark halo. Ned's heart clenched. Pride, terror, love. He seized his son's bracer. Craft the peace, he said hoarsely. Torren met his eyes. A boy's fear, a king's fire. He nodded. They flew. 3 dragons arrowing north toward the river pass. From Winterfell's towers, watchers saw the serpents of living flame streak across the sky, trailed by a contrail of frost smoke where shadow flames slipped. The night swallowed them. Ned organized pursuit. Glover and Mormont troops, free folk outriders, Vale knights visiting for the feast. Davos volunteered. So did Tyrion, though Ned told him he'd be more use sending ravens to every holdfast. Stannis rode with Ned, jaw set like granite. We end this, he said through clenched teeth, or the realm will be ashen bones by winter truly arrives. Miles north, Torren saw the host. The gorge, a narrow pass flanked by cliffs, boiled with figures, whites packed shoulder to shoulder, walkers gliding atop ridges. Blue torches lined their path, burning without fuel. At their center something massive towered, a palanquin of ice borne by 6 colossal dead mammoths. Inside, under an arch of frost, sat a throne of translucent bone. Upon it rested a being neither living nor dead, the frostborn king reborn, features rearranged, female now, or beyond such definitions, with a diadem of icicles radiating star-like. The frostborn queen. She raised an arm. The host halted. She extended a hand toward Torren and dragons descending. In Torren's skull bloomed a voice like wind through hollow marrow. Child of fire. Return balance or burn. Frostfire bristled. Emberwing's tail lashed. Yet in Torren's heart, a strange calm unfurled. He lifted his blade. Balance is breath, he called, though he spoke no tongue of man. And no breath shall be stilled. He drove Frostfire into a dive. Emberwing spiraled left, searing undead infantry. Shadowflame loosed its chill fog, freezing walker swords brittle. The queen lifted both arms. From the cliffs shattered spears of ice shot upward, forming a cage. Frostfire banked, but a spike grazed his wing. A membrane tore. The dragon shrieked, listing. Torren clamped harness straps, urged upward. But more spears rose. Then trumpets, real, brassy, blared from the south. Ned's relief column surged over a ridge, torches high. Stannis had brought trebuchets rigged with wildfire blood-glass canisters. Spheres of glowing resin capped in obsidian. They arced skyward, detonating in blossoms of green fire that rained molten shards. Whites dissolved. Walkers cracked. Yet the queen's palanquin shielded her, frost-absorbing flame. Emberwing crashed, exhausted, flame glands spent. Frostfire flapped raggedly above the melee, hemmed by arrows of diamond ice. Shadowflame alone darted, weaving between projectiles like black lightning. It struck the mammoths, freezing their joints until they toppled, bringing the palanquin to a tilted halt. The queen rose, silent, stepping onto snow. Her presence quenched fire where she walked. Wildfire hissed to steam. Benjen led rangers in a flanking assault, hacking with bloodglass axes. Meg Mormont roared, cleaving whites in twain. Yet for each yard gained, fresh dead clambered from snowdrifts, called by the queen's silent pulse. Torrin landed Frostfire hard, rolling free. He sprinted toward Emberwing, coaxing the dragon up. Emberwing rasped, throat raw-dodgy. Torrin pressed palm to scaled chest. Sword's runes blazing. "One breath more," he whispered. A crimson glow passed from blade to dragon. Emberwing inhaled, and exhaled a plume no man had seen. A spiral of red and blue, intertwining, fire and ice fused. It struck the queen. For the first time, she recoiled. Ned saw hope flaring. He charged, ice raised. Dawnfire's glow pierced the night from Daenora's position on the flank. She fought wounds but pressed on, carving a path. Stannis' remaining catapults hurled the last of wildfire glass. Melisandre stood beside Davos, chanting, flames wreathing her arms. The queen recovered. She spoke aloud, voice ringing across stone. "Balance requires silence." She raised her hands. The sky above tore as clouds spiraled, manifesting a vortex that drew in fire, snow, and sound alike. Frostfire lifted, but the vortex pinned him. Emberwing skidded low, whipping wings futile. Shadowflame flared, trying to counter the pull, but its cold only fed the storm. Torrin felt the blade in his grip vibrate, runes glowing blood-hot. Images flashed. Skara's eyes, Hearttree's tears, Mage kneeling. He understood. He turned to Ned, a dozen yards away, battling two walkers. "Father!" he yelled. Ned swung ice, severed his foes, then looked. Torrin raised the sword. "It wants my silence. I give it song." He plunged the flame glass into the earth. Light erupted. Every shade of dawn, from pale rose to molten gold, shot through with the deep blue of northern night. The ground rippled, stones liquefying into rivers of living color that carved runes in the snow. The vortex faltered, then reversed, sucking inward toward the blade. Frostfire fell free. Emberwing regained air. Shadowflame dove, adding its frosted breath to the swirl. The queen raised barriers, but color streamed through them, etching cracks. Her diadem shivered. Torrin staggered. The sword consumed something from him. Skara's legacy, perhaps, or his own life heat. Ned found him, gripped his shoulders. "Hold, son. You are the hearth." Together they braced. Daenora saw and understood. She sprinted, ignoring pain. Dawnfire in both hands. She leapt onto the stream of color. It bore her like water, until she reached the queen. With a cry equal parts agony and exultation, she drove Dawnfire into the diadem. The blade rang once, shattering the crown. The queen screamed, silent and deafening. Her form fractured into myriad shards of black ice that arced skyward, dissolving into points of starlight. The host collapsed. Whites crumbled. Walkers burst into diamond dust. The vortex imploded into the sword, which snapped, fragments dissolving before they touched ground. Torrin slumped. Ned caught him. Emberwing and Frostfire landed beside, keening low. Shadowflame perched on Torrin's shoulder, curling around him like living smoke. Silence settled. No, not silence. A hush filled with heartbeat, with panting men, with the creak of cooling armor. Snowflakes drifted, gentle, untainted by sorcery. Ned looked across the field. Daenora knelt amid fading sparks, dawn fire dim but whole. She swayed. Stannis ran to brace her. Benjen found Ned, eyes damp with awe and grief. "Is it done?" he whispered. Ned gazed north, where the sky shimmered faintly, as if some curtain beyond mortal sight had torn and now mended. "It is begun," he answered. Behind, the army gathered. Free folk clasped watch brothers in stunned camaraderie. Kevin's knights bound wounds of bare islanders. Melisandre raised her arms, murmuring a prayer of ash and dawn that drifted upward like embers freed at last of their pyre. And in the center, Torrhen opened his eyes, violet flecked with gray, and exhaled a plume of breath that fogged, then cleared, leaving the air warmer than any spring breeze. They carried their wounded home in carts, but the dead they buried at the gorge beneath cairns of stone, each laid by hand. One cairn, smaller, held the remnants of Torrhen's sword, now cold glass shards that shimmered faintly with Skara's memory. Torrhen set the first stone himself. "No blade lasts forever," he said softly. "Perhaps the peace will." Weeks passed. Harvests rose rich, watered by snowmelt, untainted by dread. The Watch rebuilt towers. Free folk planted barley in fields that once hosted only wind. Queen Cersei's pure light dwindled when no dragons scorched their predicted apocalypse. Tywin honored his treaty, sending masons to repair roads the undead had cracked with frost. In King's Landing, Robert decreed a 10-year remission of northern taxes, for bravery beyond our measure, though Baelish spent months figuring how to fix the gap. Torrhen turned 16 beneath banners of intertwined wolf and dragon. He no longer carried a sword. No forge could yet shape a replacement worthy of what was lost, but he bore a staff inlaid with dragon glass and weirwood, gift from Benjen and Daenora together. He trained not for war, but for guidance, mastering astronomy with Old Town scholars who traveled hungry for dragon sight, studying law under Davos, learning healing arts from poppy-steeped Tyroshi surgeons passing through. When people asked him why, he answered, "A blade that strikes once is finished. Knowledge strikes forever." The dragons grew. Frostfire's wings spanned 20 yards. Emberwing's breath could curl mangled steel like parchment. Shadowflame's eyes held galaxies of chilled fire. They roosted each wherever they pleased. Frostfire atop the rebuilt eastern lighthouse, Emberwing often diving the glass gardens to warm the ponds, Shadowflame slinking along parapets at dusk. They hunted only what Daenora permitted, and each kill they brought back, laying it at Torrhen's feet, waiting for his nod before devouring. People came to fear them less, even as they trembled at their power. Children in Wintertown carved wooden dragons whose wings they painted half white, half red, with black shadows underneath. Some carried the toys to field edges to pray for gentle rain. Ned found himself dreaming of futures. Of a realm where dragons patrolled the sky not as overlords but as vigilant shepherds, where free folk and southern traders swapped seed grain for Irish glass without bribes, where the wall became a pilgrimage site for those wishing to see the bone cairns and remember what might have been. Yet he knew futures were fragile. He walked the battlements each dusk with Daenora's hand in his, and they spoke not of certainties but of vigilance dressed as hope. One twilight they paused, looking north. A shimmer danced along the horizon, the aurora perhaps, or some echo of broken magic healed. Daenora rested her head on Ned's shoulder. "Do you think the walkers are ended?" Ned considered the quiet wind. "I think endings are illusions men cling to when they fear new beginnings." He kissed her hair. Silver under sunset. "But I believe the darkness has learned we will answer, and that answer will not be silence." Below, in the courtyard, Torrhen laughed as Frostfire tried to nudge a haycart upright, while Ghost barked at Emberwing for stealing the driver's cap. Shadowflame perched on a lamppost, glowing eyes half closed, tail twitching like candle flame. Ned allowed himself a smile. Somewhere behind them, ravens stirred with new messages. Of trade negotiations, of quarrelsome aldermen, of rumors from the east about a silver-haired queen and 3 bright eggs. Problems for tomorrow. Tonight, honor bent but unbroken wrapped Winterfell in the hush of near miracle. Wolves howled in the wolfswood. Dragons answered on high. And between them the fragile craft of peace shone like a new forged blade whose tempered edge no night could swallow. Grey light seeped over the eastern ramparts, washing the stones of Winterfell pale as unbleached bone. Ned Stark drew his cloak tighter and walked the silent circuit of the battlements, boots scuffing at frost already spider-webbing the parapet, though it was barely the second week of harvest. The chill pressed deeper than season alone could account for. South-blown rumors spoke of feverish summers in the Reach, yet the north tasted winter on the tongue as surely as salt in a sailor's beard. Ned paused at a crenelle to search the paling sky. No dragon, a rarity these days. Frostfire and Emberwing had vanished before dawn with Torrhen astride the paler beast's shoulders, riding for the White Knife Delta on some errand of mapping he considered vital to the next year's flood management. Shadowflame would be lurking, doubtless, but that creature blended with air itself, until one felt rather than saw its presence. Far below, cook fires shimmered. The smell of barley cakes drifted upward. Ned's gaze fell on the distant field beyond the Godswood, where Daenora's forge shed pulses of crimson through shutter slats. She and the Braavosi Master Smith, Magister Fierro. Their goal was no mere weapon. Daenora meant to birth a tool that could cut and cauterize. A surgeon's knife scaled to dragon size, for rumor claimed that somewhere in Yeti artificers had fashioned siege claws of star metal able to pierce dragon hide. If they can wound, she had said, we must be able to heal. Steps scuffed behind him. Benjen appeared, hair wind-tangled, cheeks raw but eyes bright despite the hour. Raven came from Castle Black while you walked, he said, offering the letter. The seal was cracked already. Benjen would not delay dire news for ceremony. Eastwatch spotted sails. Braavosi sigil, colors reversed. The men who disembarked asked passage to Winterfell, for parley with Wolf and Wing. 300 strong, armed but flying banners of truce. Ned frowned. Braavos rarely sent soldiers for talk. They sent bankers for debt and faceless men for silence. Did Cotter Pike accept the words? He led a dozen past the gate. The rest remain on their ships. Benjen lifted a brow. They were led by a woman calling herself Calienne of the Quiet Tide. She claims to speak for a conclave of free cities fearing the second tomb. Their wizards dreamt dragon shadow melding with ice. They come to ask Torrhen's oath that his creatures will not fly south unbidden. Then, Ned exhaled a plume of breath white as cobweb. Everything returns to oaths. He studied the letter's neat, Braavosi glyphs, then folded it. We'll meet them, but the boy is 2 days gone downriver. He has Emberwing. He'll return in half a day if Shadowflame chooses to carry the word. Benjen allowed a tight smile. Assuming you trust that one to deliver ravens. Ned attempted a smile in return but found only fatigue. Sometimes I think that Shadowdrake understands our secrets before we voice them. He clapped Benjen's shoulder. Ready lodging. And see that Magister Fierro secures the forge. I'll not have Braavosi Sellsword strolling past a newborn blade. By nightfall, the Braavosi delegation filed beneath Winterfell's gatehouse, their boots thudding in eerie unison. Calienne rode at their head astride a white courser, cloak of dove-gray rippling like low surf. She wore no armor. Instead, a quilted gambeson of shimmering silk, each panel stitched with a muted face. Wolf, kraken, dragon, lion, stag, lips sewn shut. She dismounted, bowed without flourish, and greeted Ned in fluent, softly accented Westerosi. The many-faced god sees many endings, Lord Stark. We come so one of them might be avoided. Ned led her to the great hall, flags of wolf and dragon fluttering in unseen drafts. There, Daenora waited with dawnfire sheathed, and Mage Mormont, fresh from the forge, hands blackened but grip steady on a new hafted axe. Calienne's gaze lingered on the steel glass edge that glimmered green when torchlight caught it. Dragon's mercy, she murmured, turned to man's tool. Daenora inclined her head. Mercy often requires an edge. Servants poured mulled pine ale while Caliene spoke. The free cities, she said, had suffered fire ships in Pentos harbor, conjured storms in Myr that left glassy craters where fields once stood. The Saffron Oath, an alliance of exiled warlocks and bankrupt slavers, blamed Westerosi dragons for every cataclysm. They reckoned if the creatures would not submit, they must be broken before they grew as large as the ancients. Already, spies whispered of forged harpoons, tipped with basilisk venom cooled in moonglass, shipped west under seal of House Celtigar, purchase rumored by Cersei in secret. Braavos worried any such conflict would ignite shipping lanes, crumble loan chains, birth a war beyond coin. We seek covenant, Caliene concluded, eyes flicking to the darkened rafters where Shadowflame might lurk unseen. A binding smaller than prophecy, larger than mere trade. Dragons promise not to soar beyond the neck without dispatch. Braavos pledges no weapon shall cross the sea designed for drake-slaying. Balance preserved. Menatando. Daenora's expression remained unreadable. Promises hold until fear frays them. Better we mend fear. She rose, beckoned Caliene to a window slit. Outside, Emberwing and Frostfire slept curled beside the lime-washed rookery tower, breaths wisping steam. Snowflakes drifted but melted an arm's length from their hides. Look at them. Do they seem conquerors, or children at rest? Caliene's breath fogged the stone. All children grow. So must trust. Daenora turned. Bring your harpers, your masons, your scriveners. Help build new watchposts manned by Northmen and Braavosi both, stocked with glass and grain alike. Let knowledge be the leash, not fear. She held out her hand. Caliene hesitated, then clasped it. A hall that had witnessed countless grim councils rang with applause from knight, ranger, and free folk chief alike. Ned felt a warmth not from fire's blaze but from possibility. Thin, flickering, yet real. Torrhen returned at dawn, wind-burnt and exhilarated. He brought sketches of delta runoff patterns and news of a beaver dam large enough to irrigate 3 villages if channeled. But joy dimmed when he learned of Braavosi concerns. Still dirty from flight, he walked with Ned along the Godswood pool, eyes on the heart tree's bleeding face. It never ends, he said quietly. One feared dead, 3 more spawned. Nor should it, Ned answered. Fear keeps swords sheathed as much as it draws them. He touched his son's shoulder. Caliene sailed days to speak, not stab. That means the craft is working. Torrhen managed to smile. Craft, the peace. But his gaze drifted northward over the wall's direction. I dreamed on the flight back, he murmured. The frostborn queen shattered, yet shards still float in the night, like empty armor waiting a new spirit. Something stirs among them. Not cold, not exactly, hunger. Ned said nothing. The weirwood leaves rustled though no breeze stirred. Torrhen exhaled, resolve settling like a helm on his brow. When the Watchers finish rebuilding the ice fort rampart, I ride to Eastwatch. If shards gather, I must see. You will not ride alone. Never again, Torrhen agreed. News of the Braavosi pact reached King's Landing before the ink dried. Cersei's reply was swift. She summoned the Grand Council, draped herself in cloth of gold so rich it seemed molten, and accused the North of inviting foreign garrisons. Robert, weary of quarrels, shrugged that if Braavos wanted to pay for watchposts, it spared crown coin better spent on tourneys. Tywin, calculating leverage, offered to match Braavosi funds with Lannister gold, at low interest, ensuring the Rock's lion sigil flown beside every new tower. Varys chirped that too many banners confused ravens. Meanwhile, Qyburn slipped away to Maker's crypts where wildfire candles hissed green. Rats scuttling near the vats vanished, reborn as ice-stiff husks hours later. He recorded the results with manic glee. At Dragonstone, Stannis drilled men to load wildfire glass ballistae faster. Melisandre watched the sea each dusk, claiming she saw a dark-sailed fleet tacking westward named in fire as The Pale Maw? Davos quietly stalked rope and limes. War might not come, but hunger, plague, or panic surely would. Autumn rattled its dry fingers before surrendering to true frost. Torren, Daenora, and a mixed escort rode east to Eastwatch, dragons above, Braavosi observers behind. Ned stayed to anchor Winterfell, heart heavy but trusting. He busied himself with harvest fairs, with setting Mage's new steel glass scythes into farmers' hands, with testing a prototype of Daenora's surgeon blade on a frost-burned ram. Slice, cauterize, no infection. But nights grew longer, and sleep seldom came. One starless evening, a lone captain limped into port at White Harbor. He carried a sealed box of ebony. The seal bore 3 crowned skulls. Sigil of the Blackstone Brotherhood. Cell sails turned cultists from the stepstones. Wyman Manderley, cautious, forwarded the box to Winterfell unopened. Inside, Ned found a mask of bleached bone carved into a wolf's face, its jaw wired with Valyrian steel teeth. No message accompanied it, yet its meaning thundered. Fear returns. Ned summoned Tyrion, now lingering in the north as unofficial envoy. The dwarf studied the mask, tapped its teeth. Valyrian steel is scarce these days. Someone spent enough to feed a town making this. He looked up. A threat, wrapped in cost, is seldom idle. Together, they pored over merchant ledgers. 3 days later, Tyrion pointed at an entry. 12 barrels of quicksilver purchased in Tyrosh by agents of Lord Arayn Waters, former master of ships, now pirate prince. Quicksilver for what? Tyrion's brow furrowed. Mixed with shade of the evening, he muttered. Forms a lacquer said to harden molten glass instantly. He met Ned's gaze. Hard enough for a spearhead. Ned pictured wildfire glass harpoons and dragon flight. Hard enough to pierce hide. They dispatched ravens, but storms swept the neck, grounding birds. Ned armed riders, roads iced over. By the time morning reached Torren at Eastwatch, the Pale Maw already loomed off Skagos. Hulls bone-washed, masts black. Daenora's scout hawk reported ballistae swiveled on every deck. Torren wasted no hour. He and Frostfire launched, Emberwing close. Shadowflame peeled south, invisible. Braavosi arrowships followed but lagged. Off Skagos' jagged cliffs, the first spear flew. Quicksilver glass, fletched with raven feathers, it struck Frostfire's wing, cracked but did not pierce. The second missed, streaming caustic smoke where liquid metal bled. Torren dove, torching the forecastle. But more ships encircled, their crews chanting verses in tongues, neither Westerosi nor Valyrian. Doom be returned, flesh be undone. On shore, Skagos clans gathered, axes raised, loyal now to Winterfell's dragon prince. They howled challenge over thundering surf. Asha Greyjoy captained one of the Braavosi galleys, ramming a bone ship amidships. Splinters flew, shark-toothed reavers spilling into the sea. Yet the flagship held a weapon unseen, a trebuchet pivot launching a net of chain frozen to brittle clarity. The net snared Emberwing's hind leg. The dragon screamed, tumbling toward cliffs. Torren felt the pull in his own sinew. He healed Frostfire, dove beside Emberwing, hacking at chains with dagger. Glass steel sparks flew. The Reaver crew heaved, dragging dragon and rider toward deck, spikes laced with basilisk venom. A shadow eclipsed the moon. The chain frosted white, snapped like sugar. Shadowflame materialized, jaw clamping the trebuchet's arm. The wood froze, shattered. The flagship's mage captain shrieked a prayer to the many maws, and hurled a globe of searing mercury. Shadowflame swallowed it. A gout of violet fire erupted from its nostrils, vaporizing the mage and half the quarterdeck. Frostfire and Emberwing rallied. 3 dragons wreathed the fleet in spiral of opposing flame, blue-white, copper-red, and star-dark cold. Ships burst, boiled, or froze and cracked, depending which breath struck. By dawn, the Pale Maw was driftwood. Torren landed on Skagos beach, helped Emberwing limp ashore. The net had cut deep. Black venom oozed. He pressed his staff's glass tip to the wound. Heat pulsed, cauterizing, but poison lingered. He feared to lose his companion when a woman emerged from surf spray. Calienne, cloak soaked. She knelt, produced a vial of basilisk antiserum. Bravosi debt repaid. The medics flushed the cut. Emberwing's breathing eased. The victory cost. Bravosi galleys gutted. Skagos warriors burned. Frostfire laned for weeks. Torrhen sent ravens. The threat had evolved, born not of cold but envy. The doom returns in hearts, not stone, he wrote. Winterfell swelled with wounded and delegates to the Aftermath Council. Robert himself arrived, half the King's Guard in tow, cloak snapping on raw wind. He embraced Torrhen fiercely, then grumbled about damn fool risks. Cersei did not travel. Her belly swelled with wine or plots, rumor said. But Jaime came, flanked by Tarly and Randall's son Dickon. Tywin sent no reply. Kevin apologized, citing harvest levy disputes. Ned read the omissions like runes. The realm's bowstring drew taut again. During council, arguments flew thicker than snow. Should the crown tax imports of quicksilver, ban sea trade of basilisk venom, station dragons to patrol every gulf? Each measure meant coin and sovereignty surrendered. Southerners balked. Braavos offered loans. Robert balked harder. It was Tyrion, half drunk, half canny, who proposed a dragon charter. Any city wishing dragon patrol paid grains or physicians to the north, equal to their weight in silver. In return, dragons answered verified alarms. A rotating tribunal, one maester, one priest of the seven, one Bravosi sea lord, would arbitrate abuse. Amazingly, the hall approved after 3 days' haggle. Yet, while lords debated, Qyburn acted. In a crypt beneath Maegor's holdfast, he perfected an aerosol of shade mercury, chilled by ice fire, captured from wild shards of the Walker crown. One vial abandoned in test corroded iron in minutes. Whispers said he'd found donors among Blackstone survivors, seeking revenge for Skagos. He named the vapor Night's Breath. Its target, dragon lung tissue. Varys learned fragmentary details, dispatched a sparrow north. But on the King's Road, bandits waylaid the bird-bearer. Only after a delay of 6 days did Ned's desk receive a torn, half-blood blurred note. Beware the breath that kills the night alive. He shared it with no one but Mage and Daenora, not yet sure. Daenora listened, then led him into the forge. There lay a blade newly cooled, a long sword, Valyrian core welded with blood-glass filigree, its fuller carved in glyphs meaning hearth and hope. For you, she said, and for what hunts in shadow. Ned lifted it. The metal felt warm as sunlit stone. He named it Hearthkeeper. The first snows of true winter fell thick as goose down. Torrhen rode the wall's heights south of Icemark when a hornblast, 2, then 3, shivered the forest. From the pines stumbled a girl no older than 9, hair silver gold, eyes violet. She bore ragged Myrish lace and a half-scorched cloak of Targaryen black. "My name is Valina," she told Torrhen, voice hoarse. "I escaped the saffron oath. They bred me to hatch their chained eggs." She uncurled a palm. Inside lay a stone no bigger than a gull's egg, shell-mottled green gold. It thrummed with heat. That night, under watchfire, Valena told her fragmented tale. A cult seeking to birth dragons by feeding children jugs of wildfire and shade potion, then sealing them inside basalt vaults with fossil eggs. Most died raving. She alone survived long enough to steal an egg and flee aboard a Lyseni merchantman that wrecked on the shivering sea. Walkers found her, but fled her heat. She wandered until freefolk scouts brought her south. Torrhen felt dread coil. If oath wizards could fabricate dragon seeds, peace would fracture like river ice in thaw. Ned, reading the girl's fractured memory, summoned the next council at Moat Cailin, neutral ground. Robert, weary, demurred. Cersei refused. Tywin, as ever, sent gold, no voice. But Stannis came, and Asha, and Calienne. There Torrhen proposed the unthinkable. Share dragon eggs with sworn allies under chartered oversight. If every land holds one, none will dare abuse them, he argued. Stannis sneered. Dragons belonged to Flame, not Council Inc. Caliene feared proliferation. Asha laughed. Better teach krakens to fly. Debate roared through torchlit nights. In that crucible, Ned saw echoes of the old doom. Knowledge weaponized by fear. So he stepped into the circle, Hearthkeeper sheathed at his side, and offered a bargain. The North keeps 3 dragons as watchers. No egg leaves our keep. But we open the Eyrie College. Maesters, priests, Bravosi bankers, even Dothraki Khal scribes if they wish. May study drakes, cold shard relics, any craft of life or death. Knowledge shared is fear-starved. Melisandre, present, pronounced the idea forged in the living fire. Tyrion declared libraries cheaper than sieges. In the end, the council ratified by slim margin. They named the new order the Keepers of Balance. Caliene donated the first archive cart. Scrolls on Bravosi hydromancy. Stannis promised dragon-stunned sealed cellars of lore. Corin Halfhand, newly raised ranger commander, sent journals of Icewind patterns. Valena, wide-eyed, gifted her smuggled egg to the college, sealing it in a crystal casket studded with weirwood chips. Seasons veered. 3 more winters came and went, mild compared to legends. Summers waxed, but never flamed. The realm's cracks did not vanish, yet grass grew between them. House Tyrell planted experimental vineyards in the gift. The vintage Icefire Blue sold for fortunes in Pentos. The free cities began paying Dragon Patrol tithe not in coin but in healers and timber. North shipyards boomed. Qyburn, stripped of ranks after one night's breath vial leaked and froze half the black cells, disappeared. Rumor spoke of him joining the pure light's dying embers. Robert grew quieter, fatter, but kinder. He named Gendry Waters Master Smith of the Crown, legitimized him, stirring new court whispers of succession lines twisting like ivy, yet war did not blossom. And Torhen, Sir Torhen, Warden of Skyfire, grew into a man of calm voice and storm-quick action. On his 19th name day he rode Frostfire from Winterfell to Sunspear in 4 hours of relay flight, delivering Antiphinum to cure a Redwine envoy bitten by a sand viper. Emberwing patrolled Stepstone's storms, dousing wildfire hulks. Shadowflame became legend. Sailors claimed a strip of night followed their masts on treacherous crossings, freezing jellyfish swarms before they choked hulls. Daenora and Ned aged but never truly slowed. She chaired the college, forging blades meant to heal and tools meant to cut only stone. He mediated, traveled, listened, ever the quiet hearth around which brighter fires could burn safe. Yet in the far north, beyond even the unmapped ice rivers, and stirred anew. Vengeance's last raven spoke of auroras shaped like skeletal wings, and then silence. Torrhen stood on the wall's edge again, wind clawing his cloak, and knew the craft of peace must soon hammer a blade once more. He turned south, saw Winterfell candlelit, dragons spiraling its towers, and felt neither dread nor triumph, only readiness. For he understood now, as his father had first taught him, honor bends more easily than it breaks, but it must keep bending, reshaped with every year into the tool tomorrow requires. So long as hearths stay warm and hearts stay watchful, no night, long or living, could swallow that light. And somewhere deep in the vaults beneath the Eyrie College, the green gold egg twitched against crystal, hairline cracks spreading like veins of dawn across its shell, waiting for the world to call it forth.